arrival of the Honorable Senate and the Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
The 51st session of the Senate of the first regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Alan Peter Cayetano will be leading us in prayer this afternoon.
Let us remember we're in the holy presence of God. Let us bow our heads. Yung gusto pong umupo, medyo comprehensive po yung prayer na to. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Lord Father God, how great thou art. How great the plans you have to us, for us. To prosper us, to give us a hope and a future. We ask ourselves again and again, and sometimes even dare to ask you, bakit Lord? Bakit po naghihirap ang mga Pilipino? Bakit po napakahirap mamuhay sa Pilipinas? Why is there so much hardship and suffering? Why is food so expensive? Medical treatment out of reach? Why is housing not readily available? Bakit po ang sama ng signal ng internet at connection ng aming cellphone? You may simply answer that you gave us everything. All the resources you've given us. All the natural resources. The best people, the best talented people, islands, mountains, valleys, minerals. There is so much greed and corruption. You have reconciled us through the Lord Jesus Christ, through His death on the cross and His resurrection. You have paid for our debt in full. Yet there is so much idolatry. You have given us free will. Most nutritious at pinakamasarap na mga pagkain, binigay mo po sa mga Pilipino. Yet obesity, sobrang pag-inom, sobra po sa asukal. You've given us the most beautiful places to worship, to fellowship, to exercise. Pero katamaran din po na mag-exercise. We're given medical breakthroughs, even longer lives. Meron pang stem cell na po ngayon. But instead of treating our bodies as the temple of the Holy Spirit, we drink, we eat, we live unhealthy lives, and we give ourselves to immorality. Yet instead of answering us this way, you tell us that you so loved the world that you gave your Son, that whoever shall believe shall not perish but have eternal life. You tell us to listen to your word. You don't even require all Filipinos to listen and to obey to your word. You tell us, if your people who are called by your name will humble themselves and pray and seek your face and turn from their wicked ways, you will hear from heaven and you will forgive our sins and you will heal our land. Father, we humble ourselves. We pray. We turn from evil, from our evil ways. We ask you, Lord, please heal our land. Many lean on their own understanding and ask, how? Paano, Lord? Paano po magbago ang Pilipinas? Paano po na ang kayamanan na binigay nyo ay matikman ng bawat Pilipino? Imbis na kailangan mag-abroad at magtrabaho po sa iba. Imbis na mapalaki ang sariling anak, nagpapalaki po ng anak ng iba para lang kumita, makapag-aral ang kanilang anak. Lord, teach us not to rely on our own ways, but on yours. Not to lean on our understanding, but to lean on your understanding. When we were young, some of us here sa Senate po, mahilig pong pumasok sa school. Yung iba po, hindi. Pero tinuruan po kami ng 3 R. Reading, writing, arithmetic. Sabi po sa aming magulang, matutulong po kayo ng 3 Rs, kaya na ng mga anak niyong mamuhay sa mundong ito. Madali lang, reading, writing, arithmetic. Lord, you gave us also 3 R's. First, revival of the heart. You said, where our heart is, there our treasure is. Kung nasaan ang puso po natin, nandun po ang ating pong, kung nasaan ang kayamanan, nandun po ang ating puso. So kung ang kayamanan po natin ay pera, nandun po sa pera ang ating puso. Corruption ang aabutin natin. Pero kung yung kapwa po ang mahal natin, then kayo po, Panginoon, ang aming treasure. Unless our heart is with you instead of this world, there will be no real change or transformation. With the revival of our hearts, we learn to seek first your kingdom and your righteousness. Then you promised us that everything, every single thing will be added unto us. The second R po is restoration of the church. The church po is not the building. It is not the lay people vis-a-vis the priest, the ministers, the imams, and the pastors. Tayo po ang simbahan. The church is the body of Christ. Tayo po, together we are the church. The original church moved mountains with faith, fed thousands through faith, provided for orphans and widows, opened free medical clinics, opened schools, and taught the young people. Yes, miracles were everywhere in the original church. The sick were healed, the blind could see, the deaf could hear, the lame could stand up and walk again. But also, the church raised up medical staff and opened clinics. Many po of the duties, marami sa inaasa natin sa gobyerno ngayon, ay dati pong obligasyon ng simbahan. Natin po. But if the church is not generous, how can we ask government to be generous? If the church is immoral, how can we ask government to be moral? If the church is corrupt, how can government be clean and not corrupt? From the revival of our heart comes the change in the church, restoration. Once again, the church can take its rightful place in our nation. From revival of our hearts to the restoration of the church comes reformation of society. Change that is not skin deep, real change that transforms. Tunay na pagbabago, transformation. Jeremiah 29 tells us that the plans He has for us in verse 11, pero may kasunod po ito. Sabi po sa verse 12 and 13, then you will call on me and come and pray to me and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find. When you seek me with all your heart, I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity. So Lord, we search for you. Hear the prayers of your humble senators who are elected nationwide. We humble our hearts and we seek you, we pray. Free us from the captivity of sin, idolatry, love for money, materialism, which is the new idolatry, from poverty, from sickness, from addiction, even to social media. We claim your plans to prosper us, to give us hope and a future. Use the Senate mightily. Use our Senate President mightily. Use our majority leader mightily. Use our minority leader minority. Use every single senator, staff member, people behind the cameras. Use us mightily. Lead us, Lord God, Holy Spirit. We ask for all this in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen. Ladies of Manila, we'd like to please stand for the singing of the national anthem to be led by the Manila Symphony Orchestra. The Symphony Orchestra will also render performance, an instrumental rendition of the Senate hymn, Senadong Marangal, to be followed by songs Minamahal Kita and Kalesa. Thank you very much. The Manila Symphony Orchestra, thank you for coming this afternoon. We truly appreciate it. And thank you for the wonderful music that you played. Thank you. So, Secretary, please call the roll of members.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 22 senators present, the chair declares the presence of the quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, before we proceed with our agenda today, let me take this opportunity to greet our distinguished colleague who celebrated his 25th birthday. Not 25th, obviously. Our good friend, the gentleman from the city of San Juan, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, who celebrated his birthday last Friday, February 17th. A
Happy birthday to our distinguished colleague, Senator Estrada.
Also, at this juncture, Mr. President, may I be allowed to honor today and welcome to our Senate the Honorable Senator from France, Senator Olivier Cadic, and Her Excellency Ambassador Michel Bocuse of the French Republic. Mr. President, we take this opportunity to thank the French Republic for 76 years of fruitful partnership. And we'd also like to thank Senator Cadic and the French Senate for hosting us during our official visit last October.
Yes, if I may, my dear colleagues, and I hope I can ask you for your patience. As you know, when we had arrived in France, we were given a very, very good reception by our colleagues in the French Senate. First of all, as mentioned by the Majority Floor Leader, this year we celebrate the 76th anniversary of our diplomatic relations with the Republic of France. Formal relations, as you know, was established in 1947, and we've been good friends ever since. And I'd like to welcome with open arms our dear friend, Senator Olivier Cadic. It was a pleasure to meet you in France. This gentleman, ladies and gentlemen, is a French senator representing all French citizens living abroad, because they have that type of senator or Senate member which represents all senators living abroad. Maybe we should also have one in the Philippines, since we have Filipinos all over the world. But we'd like to also recognize our distinguished ambassador, French ambassador, Michel Bocuse. Thank you for being with us. You're always welcome in the Senate, Madam Ambassador. And I'd like to just also take this opportunity to thank from the bottom of our hearts, the French Senate for such a wonderful reception that you gave our colleagues when we arrived there last 24th of October. And we were in a delegation headed by myself, together with the Senate President pro tempore, Senator Lauren Legarda, Majority Leader Joel Villanueva, Deputy Majority Leader J.V. Ejercito, Senators Grace Poe, Senator Lito Lapid, Senator Nancy Binay, and Senator Bongo. Did I miss anyone else? I know Senator Sherwin Gatchalian was with us also at that time. And they received us so well, so warmly. And I'd like to also ask you to give my best wishes to your Senate President Gerard Lache. It's always an honor and a pleasure to meet your Senate President. You're a very charismatic Senate President. And of course, Senator Matthew Donod. Please give my best also to the head of the ASEAN French Parliamentary Group. And you know, my dear colleagues, the reason why our love affair with France continues, because we all share common values of love for democracy, rule of law, respect for human rights, as well as freedom of navigation in the West Philippine Sea. For many of you who don't know, my dear colleagues, France has been very supportive of the Philippine cause of freedom of navigation in the West Philippine Sea. And So, we want to continue the discussion with the French government, particularly with your support, Senator Kadik, with defense relations, with energy cooperation, with climate change mitigation cooperation, as well as economic relations, development cooperation, and people-to-people exchanges. Very important, being that Philippines and France have a lot of course, we have a lot of OFWs in France, as well as a lot of French expatriates that live in the Philippines. So again, to my dear colleague and our friend in the French Senate, you're always welcome in the Philippine Senate. Welcome and mabuhay. Mabuhay. I'll take this opportunity for a 1-minute suspension to allow our colleagues to approach the bench and say hello to our distinguished friend and colleague from France.
Thank
Session
you.
suspended for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, before we proceed with the reference of business, may I be allowed to again acknowledge and welcome in our session today our guests from the gallery. First, the Manila Symphony Orchestra, their conductor and executive director, Mr. Jeffrey Solares. Our guest from the executive sector, we have with us the Secretary of DTI, Alfredo Pascual, Yusek Rodolfo, and Asek Jepti. From DTI Board of Investments, ED Corazon Halili de Cosa. Department of Labor and Employment, Yusek Felipe Egargo Jr., Yusek Carmela Torres, and Asek Paul Anover. From the Department of Agriculture, Senior Undersecretary Domingo Panganiban, Asek De Mesa, Asek Benavides, Asek Bacayo, and Asek Padre. From NEDA, Yusek Crystal Uy. From BOC, Commissioner Bienvenido Rubio and Assistant Commissioner Maronilia. We also have with us, Mr. President, from the Department of Interior and Local Government, Asek Rolando Puno. Department of Information Communications Technology, Yusek Ana May Lamentillo, and OIC Yusek Lou Delfin, and other officials, Mr. President, who are with us today. We also have with us, Mr. President, the guest of this representation, our former colleague in the House of Representatives, the Mayor of Trinidad, the province of Bohol, Mayor Roberto Cajes, Municipal Administrator Judith Cajes, Vice Mayor Danilo Bandala of Corelia, Bohol. From the Municipality of San Francisco, Agusan del Sur, guest of Senator Bato de la Rosa, Mayor Inday Grace Paredes Bravo, Vice Mayor Palabrica, Zamboanga del Norte Vice Mayors Chong Masugbo, Salak, Humawak, Makapas, and Maraon, Mr. President. Also guest of our colleague Senator Alan Cayetano, Mayor Bimbo Ali of General SK Pendatun, Maguindanao, Barangay Captain Wating Usman, and Barangay Captain Ilaw of Davao City. Tuguegarao City Mayor Myla Ting is with us with her councilors, guests of Senator Gatchalian. We all welcome them in our Senate, Mr. President.
Yes, I would like to thank the Manila Symphony Orchestra for playing in today's session, and likewise the key economic team who are here present, the key officials, thank you for coming, as well as the local officials. Welcome to your Senate.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 50th session, February 15, 2023, and consider the same as approved.
Is there an objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, at this juncture and with the permission of the body, I move that we resume consideration proposed Senate Resolution number 485 under Committee Report number 29. This is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement.
Is there objection? There being none, resumption of consideration of proposed Senate Resolution number 485 under Committee Report number 29 is now in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of this measure is that we have sponsored the measure, and I now move to open the period of interpellation and recognize the sponsor, our Senate President, Senator Mig Zubiri, and Senate President Pro Temp, Senator Loren Legarda.
Hearing no objection, period of interpretation is in order. We recognize our Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri and Senate President Pro Tempore Loren Legarda.
Yes,
Move
just
for
ask
a minute suspension, Mr. President.
suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
Mr. President, may I be allowed to, may I be recognized, Mr. President, to interpellate the distinguished Senate President, Mr. President.
The majority leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. The onset, may I just put on record that this representation is in support of this measure and to clarify some issues that's been raised for quite some time. This representation ask our distinguished sponsor if I may be allowed to just ask some clarificatory questions, Mr. President.
I'd be honored, Mr. President, I'd be honored to answer the questions of our majority floor leader.
Yes, Mr. President. Just briefly, Mr. President, we are all aware that RCEP is an ASEAN-led free trade agreement which consolidates its existing regional FTAs with Australia, China, Japan, Korea, and New Zealand into a modern, comprehensive, high-quality, and mutually beneficial economic partnership agreement. May I ask the distinguished sponsor, bago po natin pag-usapan ang detalye ng RCEP, maaari po ba tayong bigyan ng ating distinguished sponsor ng brief summary lang po, summary o overview ng nasabing agreement na ito?
Yes, my dear colleagues, Mr. President, yung RCEP kasi po isang ASEAN-led free trade agreement, FTA, which consolidates existing regional FTAs. Marami po tayong FTA from ASEAN plus 1, that's Japan, ASEAN plus 1, China. So ito po ay existing regional FTAs. Dagdag po dito ang Australia, China, Japan, Korea, and New Zealand into a modern, comprehensive, and high-quality and mutually beneficial economic partnership agreement. Sabi mo kanina, Mr. President, sabi po ng ating majority floor leader, it is modern because it updates the coverage of existing ASEAN FTAs and takes into account emerging trade issues such as electronic commerce, competition, intellectual property, and government procurement. May binanggit din po kayo kanina na comprehensive because it covers trade areas that were not previously covered by ASEAN plus 1. And ASEAN FTA such as SMEs, kasama na po yung small medium enterprises, government procurement, e-commerce, and competition. High quality, binanggit mo kanina, Mr. President, binanggit ng majority floor leader. Because levels of commitment provide more stability and predictability to businesses and investors. So, stability po yan and predictability na kailangan talaga ng ating investors, my dear colleagues, Mr. President. Some areas kasi the agreement extends beyond transparency and cooperation. And I think the most important, it's mutually beneficial because it considers the different levels of development of participating countries and provides necessary flexibilities. It also offers technical cooperation and capacity building to support implementation, Mr. President, of commitments and utilization agreements to optimize benefits for the free trade area. RCEP also, Mr. President, finally provides an open, inclusive, and rules-based trading system that can serve as a major platform to deepen and broaden economic integration in the region.
Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo. So ibig sabihin po, yung hindi covered noon, nakagaya po ng binanggit ng ating sponsor, yung pang mga para sa mga small, medium enterprises, dito po sa ating iraratipika, kung ito po ay ating pagbobotohan, kasama na po ito. At binanggit niyo po kanina, Ginoong Pangulo, ito po ay, itong agreement na ito ay mag-optimize, magpapalawak lalo ng benepisyo na maaaring maibigay sa ating mga kababayan, maging sa ating bansa. So ito po ay napapanahon na magawa through this RCEP at sumasabay po ito sa mga pagbabago sa mundo. Kaya po binanggit nyo kanina, modern, ibig sabihin yung emerging trade issues na gaya ng mga nangyayari ngayon sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo, kasama po dito at mapapalakas nito ang economic integration sa ating rehiyon.
Tama po yan, Mr. President. That's absolutely true.
Mr. President, narinig po natin noong isang linggo, nung nakaraang linggo, mula po sa ating distinguished sponsor, Senate President Zubiri at Senate President Pro Temp Loren Legarda, na ito pong RCEP ay itinuturing na world's largest free trade. pwede po bang maipaliwanag natin sa ating mga kababayan bakit ito tinawag, Ginoong Pangulo, na world's largest free trade deal?
Yeah. Magandang tanong po yan. Ang RCEP po, base sa data na meron tayo, ay malaking free trade area that covers 29% of the world's free trade at 29% of the world's GDP at 33% of global inward FDI or foreign direct investment at 47% of global outward foreign direct investment at 2.3 billion population. So in short po, 29% po ng populasyon ng buong mundo ang merkado ng RCEP. At para po sa ating kaalaman, lahat po ng ASEAN countries ay nagratipika na po ng RCEP. Ang Pilipinas na lang po ang hindi pa. At kasama natin ang mga major trading partners na binanggit ni Senate President Zubiri. Kasama na ang bansang Sina, Japan, Korea, Australia at New Zealand. Para po sa inyong kaalaman, marami na po ang ASEAN nations na free trade agreements. Hindi naman po ito ang kauna-unahang FTA. Meron din tayong tinatawag na bilateral trade agreements kung saan po solo lang ang Pilipinas, hindi po buong ASEAN ang pumasok. Isa po dyan ay kayo po ay nagratipika, kasama po natin, kasama si Senate President Zubiri nung siya'y majority leader. Ito po yung EFTA. Ito po kasama yung mga European countries na hindi po EU. Ito po ay kasama ang Liechtenstein, ang Norway, ang Iceland at Switzerland. Para po sa kaalaman ng lahat, dati po tayo ay trade deficit. Ibig sabihin po, ang balance of trade sa mga bansang yun ay hindi po sa pabor ng ating bansa. Sa pag-uudyok po ninyo, ay inatasan po ang inyong chairman ng Foreign Relations in 2018, ang inyong lingkod, na mag-sponsor po nito. Ngayon po, natutuwa po ako, base na rin sa data po na binigay po ng DTI, ang balance of trade, trade surplus na po. Ibig sabihin, ang export po ng Pilipinas sa EFTA countries na binanggit ko sa Europa na non-EU ay positibo, a trade surplus. Bakit? Sa ating mga ine-export na electric fan at mga vacuum cleaner na Dyson brand na gawa po sa Laguna. Bakit? Binabaan po ang taripa sa pagpasok sa Switzerland. Siguro sa mainit nilang summer ay bumibili silang Dyson electric fan na UK brand made in the Philippines. Kaya yung rules of origin na tinatawag, kung saan ba ang mga produkto ay, saan ba galing yan? Brand UK, made in Laguna, inaayos po ng free trade agreement. So isa po yan ehemplo na naging pabor po sa ating bansa of very recent times. It was the Congress where all of us, I guess, most of us who are here in this hall today were a part of. And unanimous ang ating pagratipika. Salamat.
Napakaganda po noong ating narinig, Ginoong Pangulo, no? Especially doon sa figures na binanggit ng ating distinguished sponsor, 29% of the world's free trade, 29% of the world's GDP, and 33% of global inward foreign direct investments. 47% naman of global outward foreign direct investments. So ibig sabihin, Mr. President, tayo na lang yung hindi sumasang-ayon dito. Tayo na lang yung hindi sumasabay. Bakit ho ba nagkaganon na Ginoong Pangulo? At parang itong nakikita natin ngayon, yung RCEP, ang pinakamalaking free trade deal sa ngayon, sa buong mundo, na kung hindi tayo sasama, hindi tayo sasabay, Ginoong Pangulo, it appears na mapag-iiwanan po ang Pilipinas kung hindi tayo magiging kabilang sa kasunduang ito. Am I correct, Madam Sponsor, Distinguished Sponsor?
Yes, absolutely, Your Honor. Totoo po yan, Mr. President. Alam niyo po, almost 30% of the world's population itong binibilang po nating 15 bansa. And sa mga sumama pa last year, Your Honors, gusto ko pong ibanggitin to. Binanggit ko to nung Lunes o nung Wednesday nung nagsalita po tayo dito sa plenaryo together with Senate President Pro Tem Lauren Legarda. Yung Vietnam, kasi sinasabi nga nila the proof in the eating is the proof of the pudding is in the eating, di ba? So sasabihin nila, baka wala namang datos na nagpapakita na ito ay makakabuti sa mga bansang sumasali sa RCEP. Pero after 1 year, Your Honors, yung Vietnam, their exports grew to over 17%, something, increased by 16.4% to RCEP countries, with a total value of 108.48 billion pesos, and 34% increase in seafood exports, amounting or accounting for 64% of the export market. Pati durian ng Vietnam, binibenta na sa RCEP countries. And they earned $50 million in durian alone last year in 2022. Thailand increased also their exports by 7.1%, amounting to $300 billion. And these are also to RCEP countries. And they also have, Cambodia rather, also had a total trade increase of 4%, amounting to 31 billion. And this is accredited to joining RCEP. Sa pagsali po nila ng RCEP, lumaki po ang merkado ng Cambodia at dumami ang kanilang exports. Imagine sa garments alone, Mr. President, 17.6% in export of garment products to Australia by a value of $102 million. So, napakalaki. And they're earning that and they're gaining that every day we speak that we do not join. Your Honors, my dear colleagues, Mr. President, tayo nalulugi. Nawawalan po tayo ng merkado.
Tama, Ginoong Pangulo. At buti binanggit niyo po yan. 4%, 31 billion US dollars. At pinaghahatian ito ng mga bansa na kasapi nito, Ginoong Pangulo. Ginoong Pangulo, it was mentioned a while ago yung pong mga free trade agreements, no? Specifically yung ASEAN free trade agreements. Kapag niratifika po ng Senado itong RCEP agreement at naging epektibo na, Ginoong Pangulo, ano po ang mangyayari sa ibang ASEAN free trade agreements natin?
Magandang tanong yan dahil gaya ng sinabi ko po ay hindi naman ito ang unang free trade agreement na pinapasukan ng Pilipinas. Ang ASEAN plus 1 FTAs will coexist with the RCEP agreement. Thus, they will continue to be implemented. Ibig sabihin po niyan, yung mga pinasukan na natin bilang isa sa ASEAN nation, sa buong ASEAN, ng free trade agreement, nandiyan pa rin yung pagbaba ng taripa sa ilat mga produkto sa mga may free trade agreement ng ASEAN ay ganun pa rin po. Kaya ang RCEP, hindi lang po ito trade liberalization agreement. Kasama po dito ang pagsuporta sa MSME, kasama po dito yung simplification ng rules of origin, kasama po dito yung digitalization ng mga MSMEs. Hindi lang po ito pagbaba ng taripa. Kasi kung pagbaba lang ng taripa ang pag-uusapan, marami na po tayong napasukan either bilateral or bilang membro ng ASEAN nation. So businesses also will have the option to choose to which to use among the FTAs depending on the degree of commitments and preferential arrangements secured in the subject FTA. Kunyari, may negosyo, mas maganda yata i-apply ko itong FTA na bago pa yung RCEP. Pero kunyari, meron naman provision sa RCEP na sakop ang isang produkto na papasok sa Japan na babagsak ang taripa sa zero para mura na ang produkto ng Pilipinas doon, ay RCEP na lang ang gagamitin ko. For example, if would be this advantageous, kunyari, to export a certain product to an RCEP party using a previous FTA, the ASEAN plus 1 FTA, then the exporter will make use of that FTA. Pipili yung dating FTA o yung RCEP FTA kung saan yung maganda an advantage sa negosyo or sa exporter mula sa Pilipinas.
So ibig sabihin po, hindi nawawala at hindi mawawala itong mga noon na pinasukan natin na free trade agreement sa Ginoong Pangulo. Ganun pa rin po itong FTA. Merong option to choose. Napakaganda po nung binanggit ng ating Senate President Pro Tem. May option to choose yung ating mga negosyante. Hindi kontra, kundi magiging katuwang ng iba't ibang mga ASEAN free trade ang RCEP, if I'm not mistaken, no?
Tama
Ginoong
po yun.
Pangulo. Magkakaroon po sila ng choice, yung mga negosyante na pumili ng FTA na gagamitin nila kung saan sila mas makikinabang. Is that correct, Your Honor?
Tama po yan, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kung ganon, Mr. President, distinguished sponsor, bakit pa natin kailangan ang RCEP agreement kung meron na po tayong mga FTAs nga na nandyan sa mga key trading partners? Ano pa ba yung bagong binibigay nitong RCEP na wala dito sa free trade agreements?
Before Senator Lauren answers, the chair would like to recognize that Senator Lauren is also helping our Senate President defend this particular measure.
As a co-sponsor, we're
As a co-sponsor.
Actually, kasagutan po niya sa tanong po, Mr. President, ni Majority Floor Leader. While it is true that ASEAN has existing FTAs with key trading partners, the degree of commitments and preferential arrangements in the said FTAs, hindi po ganun ka-comprehensive.
Yung mga
Katulad nung, wala po, sa lahat ng existing FTAs po natin, wala po sa SMEs, micro, small, and medium enterprises. Wala pong e-commerce. Hindi pa siguro uso nun. E-commerce ay biglang umunsad nung pandemic at ngayon lahat ay digital na po ang marketplace and e-commerce. Under RCEP, these are all considered and all inputted into the new RCEP agreement. Of course, it is also responsive to the growing needs of stakeholders brought about the increasing interface of economies and evolving technologies. Yung kagandahan kasi ng RCEP, Your Honors, binanggit ko po ito sa aking speech. The agreement is really about establishing clear, stable, predictable rules in doing trade and investments in the region so that it will be more convenient and competitive para sa mga negosyante, mga businesses, and investors to be integrated in the global economy. So parang ano siya? Parang bagong guidebook, bagong rule book for the whole 15 nations, no? For the whole region of 15 nations. So yan po ang long and short of it, mas madali ika nga to do business with these, and of course, with these countries. And of course, binanggit ko kanina, yung nung sa speech ko, yung rules of origin. Sinabi ko dun sa speech ko po, mga kapatid, Mr. President, kung gagawa po kayo ng damit at source out niyo po yung cotton sa China, for example, dahil hindi ganun kalawak yung cotton industry natin sa Pilipinas at kaya marami po kayong orders for Japan. Under the existing FTA, ASEAN FTA agreements with Japan, may rules of origin po yan. You can only source the materials either the Philippines or of course Japan or the country where you're going to deliver the products. For ASEAN, yung mga ASEAN partners natin, hindi po kayo makaka-source ng input from China. But under this RCEP, pwede na po. You can now get your materials from China, produce it in the Philippines, ship it out to Japan or to any other nation, and it will be a big advantage. Kahapon nga po, nabasa ko sa news, Inquirer, Philippine garment makers secure $6,480,000 worth of orders from Japan. Under that is under the existing free trade agreement. Pero paano po, dahil wala po tayo sa RCEP, kung mamimili po tayo ng input sa mura pong textile at mga fabrics sa China, hindi may konting prohibition. There's a rule of origin. So dehado tayo. Obviously, we could get more orders if it's cheaper. And our neighbors like Cambodia will have one over us because Cambodia now can source it out from China and other cheaper countries within the RCEP and then sell it to Japan. Kaya I'm happy for our garments manufacturers that they secured almost $6.5 million worth of orders from Japan. But I'm sure, Mr. President, they will be happier if we join the RCEP because mas malawak po ang makukunan po nilang mga inputs and materials for their garments.
Mr. President, maganda sigurong ipaliwanag natin ano ba yung rules of origin kasi sa lahat ng FTA, sa RCEP talaga binibigyan ng diin yung rules of origin. Rules of origin are the criteria needed to determine the national source of a product. Their importance is derived from the fact that duties and restrictions in several cases depend on the source of imports. There is a wide variation in the practice of governments with regards to rules of origin. Rules of origin are important. Mahalaga po ito. Bakit? Because many trade rules, regulations, and laws provide differential treatment, or also known as preferential rules of origin, to goods and products based on where they originate from. For example, under a trade agreement's rules of origin, certain goods may be granted duty-free or reduced tariff treatment. Maganda po yung ehemplong sinabi po ni Senate President na kung hindi tayo RCEP country, maari yung neighboring country ng China, Laos, or Cambodia ay mas mura ang kanilang pagkuha ng raw material, kung tayo po ang mag-i-import mula sa kanila, mas mahal, may taripa. Kaya pinapaliwanag ko po yung kahalagahan ng rules of origin.
Tama po, ibig sabihin sila maaaring makinabang, tayo hindi tayo makikinabang. At if I'm not mistaken, I heard it from the good sponsor, our Senate President, when he sponsored the measure, that the Philippines will gain new and more preferential tariff commitments with regard to this. And ang isa sa nagre-rema po sa akin, Ginoong Pangulo, ay yung expectation natin that in the future, when most tariffs in ASEAN plus 1 FTAs and RCEP equalize, yung bansa po natin, yung mga negosyante dito sa Pilipinas, may opt to use just the RCEP so that there is only one set of rules they adhere to, if I'm correct, Your Honor. Diba? So, napaka-flexible po nito at sa kabila ng mga umiiral na FTAs sa ASEAN, kailangan pa rin ang RCEP para mas makatugon sa pangangailangan ng mga stakeholders sa gitna ng patuloy na pag-unlad ng teknolohiya at iba pang mga pagbabagong nagaganap sa ating rehiyon. Makakatulong din po ito para maging matatag yung kalakalan sa ating rehiyon. Ginoong Pangulo, sa aking huling katanungan, I just wanted to ask Mr. President kung maaari po bang ilahad ng ating sponsors yung pong magiging benepisyo nito, direct benefits na makukuha ng ating bansa mula dito sa RCEP. Ilang beses natin narinig yung cheaper cost, convenience, competitiveness, etc. Meron ba tayong mga ganitong produkto? Ito po ba ay nai-enhance na natin? Ready na po ba tayo na pumasok dito? Ito yung million-dollar question na madalas na itatanong sa atin. Magko-complement ba ito doon sa ating mga produkto dito sa ating bansa? Itong pagpasok natin dito sa RCEP.
Marami po. Malaking tulong po ito sa ating bansa because the different industries, for example, as I mentioned before, semiconductors, manufacturing, electronics, na ginagawa po natin dito, mas malawak na po ang merkado na mapapasukan ng ating mga manufacturers. They'll have better access to New Zealand, to Australia. Napakahirap ng mga merkadong pasukin. Itong mga merkadong ipasok, Mr. President, these are difficult markets to go into. Of course, with Japan and China and Korea. Many of our agricultural products, kasi pinabanggit nila, di ba, kadehadong agrikultura. Pero sa totoo lang, Mr. President, marami sa ating mga agricultural products ay makikinabang dito. These are export products from agriculture, which are pineapples, bananas, coconuts, coconut products. And I say coconut products, that's everywhere to coconut milk, cocoa methyl ester, virgin coconut oil. Then of course you have durian and papaya, fruit cocktail, fruit juices. All these are being exported abroad. Mas malaki po ang pakinabang po natin pag sumama tayo sa itong klaseng arrangement. Not to mention, as I said earlier, garments. And there's also several components. Pag gumanda po ang merkado natin sa iba't ibang bansa, lalakas ang negosyo natin dito. Siyempre, mag-expand po itong manufacturers. When they expand, they will hire more workers. And I know this is close to the heart of our majority leader, who's a pro-labor senator. And we'll need more skilled workers. So test the man comes into play, di ba? Yung training, more skills. Of course, as I mentioned, transportation will increase within the country for this manufacturing because you have to transport the goods abroad. You have trucking, you have hauling, you have refrigeration, cold storage, you need warehousing. Grabe yung domino effect, ika nga, Mr. President. And at the same time, as I mentioned, and I'd like to continue mentioning it, sa manufacturing sector, furniture, paggawa ng furniture, meron ngang mga MSMEs, sana yung MSMEs para mabasa ko lang, yung pinakita sa akin ng aking staff na makinabang dito sa RCEP agreement. And if I may be allowed to just put on record, for example, these are small companies, Your Honor, that are raring to go. Kaya Go Negosyo, full support dito. The group of Joy Concepcion, and they're in full support of this because many of their members are very excited to do business in RCEP countries. So these are virgin coconut oil from the Small Coconut Farmers Association of Liptong Negos Oriental. Potato Corner, Zeno is an entertainment software company. Video games, they sell video games and they're going to market this to Japan and Korea. There's Red Clay Pottery Craft. These are from San Juan, La Union. They make clay pots, jars, stoves, and different pottery products. And they're excited to do business in RCEP countries. As I mentioned, RFM Corporation, Handcoal Industries, ito po ay cosmetics and pharmaceuticals, food, paint and ink, and lubricants and plastics and detergents among others. Meron pong KLT Fruits, binanggit ko kanina, yung mga fruit cocktails, mango puree, and so many. And this is like 20 pages long, Mr. President. Kaya talagang excited po sila na makasabay po natin itong ibang mga bansa at makipag-compete po sila with cheaper prices because obviously with the access of goods, access of inputs na napakamura, they can now export tariff-free to these countries na mura din pagdating doon at mabibili po ng mga dayuhan nakatira doon sa mga iba't ibang bansa. So yes, if you ask me, Your Honor, malaking tulong po ito. And I'm sure our exports will increase exponentially on the first and second year soon as we ratify this agreement.
Kung maari po tayo magdagdag kung ano pang mga benepisyo sa RCEP, this will primarily support the country's programs and policies for the resurgence of manufacturing, with 66% of imported products being sourced from our RCEP free trade area dahil lalawak nga, with a bulk of intermediate goods being sourced. This means enhanced access to cheaper source of raw materials and intermediate goods necessary for production and manufacturing. Exporters can also access a huge free trade area with preferential tariffs under simplified trade rules. Clarity, transparency in rules are important because this is an important element for business, for them to do business with ease. And other than the enhanced market access both for export and imports, RCEP provides business-friendly mechanisms to facilitate trade through clear and transparent procedures. Philippine exports can also avail of flexible certification procedures. Yung binanggit natin yung Certificate of Origin, Declaration of Origin by approved exporter, Declaration of Origin by exporter or producer. This will make it easier for businesses, especially MSMEs, to use the FTA and avail of the preferential agreement. Mahaba pa po pero siguro mukhang kumbinsado na si Majority Leader na kasi hindi ko na po babasahin yung mahabang benepisyo ayon po sa pag-aaral ni Dr. Cororota. Meron pong nag-aral po dito na improved trade balance. Hindi ko na ilalagay pero siguro magandang incorporate into the record yung benefits ng RCEP according to Dr. Cororaton na sinaad po nung briefing ng DTI at DA sa amin na gusto ko sanang basahin pero mahaba ay baka mawala pa yung agree ni Majority Leader. Okay.
Agree naman tayo, Ginoong Pangulo, no? At maraming salamat sa ating distinguished sponsors for clarifying these very important issues at hand. Napakagandang ulit-ulitin that it will be cheaper cost dahil zero or reduce yung tariff rates ng ating imported raw materials, and intermediate goods means lower cost of production for businesses, particularly yung producers and manufacturers. Yung production at manufacturing, pag lumakas po yan, ibig sabihin more jobs, more jobs, more jobs. Yung convenience na binabanggit ng ating mga sponsors, simplified and business-friendly customs procedures, friendly procedures, preferential arrangements. Dun sa competitiveness na tinatanong po natin, stable and predictable business environment for investors as well as professionals. Yung pang-encourage ng new players and opportunities in the financial sector, maging dun sa ating booming IT BPO sector na halos pumantay na doon sa mga remittances na binibigay sa atin ng ating mga OFWs. And when you talk about complementation, yung wider sourcing of raw materials for a bigger market, kasama yung 14 na bansa. But perhaps, Mr. President, yung isa na lang na gusto kong itanong, sa budget po na ipinasa natin this year, kasama po ba itong mga programa na ito para masiguro na hindi naman surprise yung ating mga industriya, lalong-lalo na sa budget ng mga iba't ibang ahensya ng ating pamahalaan, lalong-lalo na sa ating agrikultura, na baka yun yung lagi pong sinasabi nila, hindi naman yata kasama yan, hindi sila handa dyan. Baka mabulaga tayo at mas lalo tayong mapahamak. Huling katanungan na lang po, Ginoong Pangulo.
Sige, mabuting tinanong niyo po yan. It's a very good question, Mr. President, the Majority Floor Leader. Kasi yan ang katanungan palagi. Paano naman ang agriculture industry? Actually, lahat ng industriya ay sumusuporta na halos dito eh. Wala nang masyadong ibang, let's say, nagkakaroon ng negative or hesitation, negative effect or hesitation, except for the agri-sector. Pero gusto ko po lang banggitin na, Mr. President, from the beginning, na napakagaling ng ating trade negotiator. Nandito, yan nakikita niyo sa video. Yung ulo niya sa likod ko. Yan, si Asek Hepti. Asek Hepti. Na talagang alam nila sensitive masyado ang Pilipinas pagdating sa agrikultura. Kaya dinepensahan po nila ang agrikultura natin, ang sektor ng agrikultura. Kaya excluded po ito sa RCEP. Babanggitin ko muli sa mga nanonood po sa Facebook at nanonood po sa kanilang mga tahanan. Excluded po ang major Philippine agri-products, at babanggitin ko po yung excluded products para malinaw na hindi po sila kasali sa RCEP. Ibig sabihin, hindi po nagalaw yung tariff ng taripa nito. Ganun pa rin. Kung ano po na yun, ganun pa rin ang magiging tariff nito. Ito po ay swine meat, fresh, chilled, or frozen, yung karne ng baboy. Edible, offal of bovine animals. Ito po ay swine, sheep, goats, horses, hindi ko na babanggitin to, asses, mules or hinnies, fresh, chilled, or frozen liver. Poultry, meat, fresh, chilled, or frozen. Hindi na kasama po yan. Hindi po kasama. Potatoes, fresh or chilled. Patatas, hindi po kasama. Onions, shallots, garlics, leeks, and other alliaceous vegetables. Cabbages, cauliflower, kohlrabi, kale, other edible brassicas, fresh or chilled, hindi kasama. Carrots, hindi po kasama. Anong carrots sa Tagalog? Carrots. Carrots din? Ano yung carrots sa Bulacan?
Carrots din.
Carrots din. Lettuce. Mr. President, lettuce, chicory, fresh or chilled, hindi kasama. Maniok, kasama. Hindi po kasama. Sweet potatoes, hindi po kasama. Coffee, hindi po kasama. Mais, corn, hindi po kasama. Rice, hindi po kasama. Cereal, growth, meal, and pellets, hindi po kasama. Rolled and flaked grains, hindi po kasama. Other prepared or preserved meats, meat offal or blood, hindi po kasama. Tuna in airtight containers, yung tuna, century tuna, ganun. Hindi po kasama yun. Pwede pa rin pong protected pa rin under the tariff rules. Asukal, sa aking mga distrito, sa Bukidnon at sa Negros, kung saan po galing aking tatay, hindi po kasali ang asukal. Instant coffee and complete feed for animals, hindi po kasama. So, binanggit ko na po yan para malaman lang po ng mga kababayan natin, ito po yung mga hindi kasama. These are major Philippine agri-products. Now, under the 2023 budget, Your Honors, naglagay po tayo ng program for high-value crops, National High Value Crops Program. Nandito po si Yusek Panganiban. Yusek, miss na miss ka namin. Ayan, dito po siya. Sa tabi ko. Ayan. Malaki po, 1.8 billion na ilagay pong pondo dito sa 2023 budget. National Livestock Program, 4.5 billion ang nailagay po na pondo dito. Promotion of Development of our Organic Agriculture Program, we put 900 million. National Corn Program, 5 billion pesos. National Rice Program, 30.2 billion pesos. Halal Food Industry Development Program, 21 million pesos. National Urban and Peri-Urban Agriculture Program, 318 million. We even have from the DTI, Exports and Investments Development Program, 773 million. Industry Development Program, 529 million. MSME Development Program, 736 million. Napakarami po ito. Mukhang 10 pages po ito. Kung babanggitin ko po ay baka wala na po tayong oras. Pero ang ibig ko po sabihin, may pondo po tayo, mga kababayan at Mr. President, dito sa mga program na ito. Ngayon, nasa kamay na po ng mga kawani natin sa likod ko. Kasama ko po si Secretary Pascual. Kasama po natin si Senior Undersecretary Panganiban. Kasama natin yung DOLE dito. And we have also with us the Bureau of Customs are here also. And they're very serious in their anti-smuggling campaign. Nandito po si Commissioner Rubio. Please rise. Commissioner Rubio, are you here? Are you here? Nandiyan po si Commissioner, newly minted Bureau of Customs Commissioner. And in a span of 3 or 4 days, ang dami na po nilang grenade at kinasuhan na mga smugglers at mga smuggled products, agriculture products. So, we'd like to assure, Mr. President, our farmers that they will be protected as much as possible with existing trade rules and with all of the government's resources in terms of all these programs na binanggit ko, pati na rin Bureau of Customs para sa paghuli ng mga smugglers.
Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo. Napakahalaga na maisa-isa ho natin ito at mabuti na lamang ang ating mismong Senate President na champion ng agrikultura ay narito at binabanggit ito sapagkat gusto natin sabihin at mailagay sa talaan ng ating kasaysayan dito sa records ng Senado na maging ang representasyon na ito mula sa gitnang Luzon, Ginoong Pangulo, ay very interested in ensuring that we will be able to protect our farmers, our agricultural farmers, at yung mga produkto na ating sinisiguro ay mapoprotektahan at gaya ng binanggit nyo, nandyan si ASEC Alan Hefty na pwede ng ASEC safety net, safety na rin. At Ginoong Pangulo, maganda rin yung binanggit po ninyo na handa ang ating mga ahensya. So tama po kayo sa kanilang mga kamay. We trust them, we spoke to each one of them, and we are trusting them with their expertise that they will be ready. They are ready for us to be in this position to be part of RCEP. At higit sa lahat, Ginoong Pangulo, bago ako magwakas sa aking interpellation, sa kabuuan nakita po natin na una, bababa yung cost of production para sa ating mga negosyo. Pangalawa, mas magiging business-friendly itong RCEP sa ating mga negosyante. Pangatlo, mas magiging competitive po tayo yung ating mga lokal na produkto considering din yung suporta na ibinibigay ng ating mga ahensya ng pamahalaan. At pang-apat, para sa akin napakahalaga, Ginoong Pangulo, yung pagpuposisyon ng ating bansa, ng Pilipinas bilang isang manufacturing hub, bilang isang innovation hub at sentro center ng training at education sa ating rehiyon. So muli, Ginoong Pangulo, ang aking pasasalamat sa ating distinguished sponsor, Senate President Zubiri, Senate President Pro Tem Loren Legarda, at sa ating mga resource persons na naririto ngayon sa Senado, ang aking taus-pusong pasasalamat. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo.
Maraming salamat din po sa ating
Salamat.
coordinator.
Salamat sa ating Majority Leader.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we recognize our next interpellator, the distinguished gentleman from the city of Valenzuela, no other than Senator Win Gatchalian. So move, Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Gatchalian is recognized, but before Senator Gatchalian, just for the record, with the consent of the body from the time the Senate President Pro Tempore, Loren Legarda, who is a co-sponsor of Senate Resolution 485, will intervene to provide additional replies and manifestations with the permission of our colleagues on the floor, for the record. Senator Gatchalian, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, will our Senate President as well as Senate President Pro Tempore receive some clarificatory questions?
Absolutely, Mr. President. I'll be honored to ask, to answer questions of our distinguished chairperson of the Committee on Ways and Means.
Thank you. Thank you, Senate President. Much have been asked by our good majority floor leader, but I'll start off with the biggest elephant in the room, and I think the Senate President ably answered this earlier, which is agriculture. And I heard earlier, and it was flashed on the screen, that several products were excluded in the list of products that cannot be, or the tariffs will remain as is. And some of the products there are, as on the slide, are rice, sugar, poultry, and other common products, no, that we produce here in the Philippines. Mr. President, just for the education of everyone, if we will not touch, for example, rice and sugar and poultry, what is the existing tariffs on rice and sugar, and as well as poultry? These are common products that Filipinos eat. And what are the current tariffs and importing procedures for these products?
According to our chief trade negotiator, on rice it's 35%. On sugar, MF, what's the MF?
65.
What's MFN?
65.
Most favored nation.
Most favored nation status ng sugar is 65%.
65. So, in other words, Mr. President, rice will remain at 35% tariff, and sugar will remain at 65% tariff. And this is for the protection of our local farmers and local producers. Is that correct, Mr.
Yes,
President?
may I, Mr. President? Tama po si Senate President Zubiri sa kanyang sinabi, gaya ng pinaliwanag kanina, pag hindi po ay binabanggit sa RCEP ay sakop po ng existing trade agreement. Kung ano po ang mga taripang nakapataw ngayon, dahil alam natin na ayaw natin maapektuhan ang mga vulnerable at sensitibang mga produkto na makakasama sa ating mga nagpapakain sa atin, gaya ng mangingisda at magsasaka, kaya hindi po kasama ang sensitive commodities gaya ng rice at ng sugar at marami pang iba. In fact, there are only 33 agricultural tariff lines covering 15 agricultural products. Ang immediately zero po ay olive at olive oil. Sinuri ko po sa 5 oras na briefing at 5 oras, 7 hours na hearing kung saan po yung industriya ng olive oil. At olive ay napaalaman ko dahil ko naman ay may konting alam sa agrikultura as a weekend farmer, hindi ko kayang magtanim. Hindi naman tayo Mediterranean country na nagtatanim ng olives. Kaya ang sagot po dyan, we can name all the produce that we can think of and talk for 48 hours. Pero kung di po ito sakop ng 15 products na ninegotiate ng 10 taon ng 3 administrasyon, ay hindi po ito sakop. Uulitin ko po, nagsimula po 2012 Aquino administration. Ninegotiate po ng Aquino administration DTI, Duterte administration DTI, at nilagdaan po, pumasok po dyan ng end na ng Duterte administration at in fact na-transfer na po sa Senado at si Senator Coco Pimentel na dating chairman ng Foreign Relations ang nagde-defend nun. Kaya nakumbinsi po akong tumulong kay Senate President ay sinangguni ko rin kay dating chair Coco Pimentel dahil naging chair ako ng Foreign Relations. Sabi nga niya, kaunti lang ang sakop. Ngayon po, nandito na tayo sa huli. Una, parang agam-agam din ako. Sabi ko, nung agrikultura at MSME, mga advokasya natin, no? Pero 15 product lines. At yung mga pinakahalagang inyong binanggit po ay hindi sakop. Kung ano po ang trato ngayon sa taripa, yun po ang mananatili.
Just to add lang sa Your Honor sa sugar, sa most favored nations is 65, but ASEAN is 5%.
But in other words, Mr. President, for common produce such as rice, sugar, it will remain as is.
As
Hindi
is.
gagalawin ho siya.
As is po.
So, in other words, Mr. President, wala pong dapat ipangamba ang ating mga magsasaka, mga farmers natin, especially those who are part of that list of products. May mga list kaninang pinakita. No? Can we flash that again? Yung mga list.
Yes, we faster. As Mr.
Yeah.
President, I guarantee the distinguished sponsor, kung alam mo naman paano ko dinidepensa ng sugar industry dito sa,
Correct, Mr.
sa
President.
Senado. Minsan nga dun sa train law, muntik po akong mapaiyak dahil apektado po ang industriya ng asukal if we continued with the high fructose corn syrup issue and we allowed high fructose, mamamatay po yung sugar industry. So I know my colleagues know how deeply I am invested into the sugar industry and the agriculture sector and how much I care for it. So hindi po, I will not defend it, Your Honor, if to be honest, kung alam ko apektado po yung agriculture sector dito. But after my discussions with our trade negotiators, with the DTI, with the DA, hindi po sila apektado.
Thank you, Mr. President, and that's good to hear. And we all know that our farmers are under extreme pressure because of high production costs and also unpredictable weather patterns. So it's good to hear that at least for the most common products, agricultural product, it remains as is, Mr.
Yes, sir.
President.
Yes.
Mr. President, on the other side naman, what are the things or what are the products that will be allowed, what are the products that will be allowed to come in the country with lower tariff rates, Mr. President?
Agricultural products, Your Honor.
Agricultural products, Mr.
Ito
President.
po, binanggit kanina ni Senator Lauren yung iba, but we'll put it on the slide, please.
Yeah,
It's
para-
fish fillet. And the current tariff for Australia and New Zealand is 5%, and RCEP tariff commitments is on year 15 is 0%. So even for fish fillet po, it's a 15-year graduated decrease. 15 years po, 15 taon bago
So, ang tagal,
mag-zero.
Mr. President.
Pakatagal
15 years.
po. Wala na po tayo sa Senado niyan,
Wala na po.
Mr. President. And frozen mackerel, ganun din. In year 30 right now, Australia and New Zealand is 4%, Republic of Korea 5%. Ang pinag-usapan natin ay 20 years. Year 20, 3%. So, halos 1 at 2% lang ang bababa in 20 years. So, that's enough time, I think. And I believe we do not really have much of frozen mackerel. I don't know. I might be wrong, but I know mackerel is in the cold waters. Celery is Australia, New Zealand, 16%, the current tariff. It is going to be 15% in year 20. So 1% lang ibababa niya in 20 years, Your Honors, for celery. Sausages, ito, Australia, New Zealand is 32%, and our commitment is in year 20, 23%. Pero hindi naman po tayo major exporter ng sausage. Yung mga Hungarian sausage, yung mga
Masarap
German
yan, Mr.
sausage.
Chairman. Oo.
Oo,
Mr.
iba
President,
naman
masarap
yun.
yan. Paborito
Oh,
natin yan.
Yung binanggit ni Ma'am kanina, yung olives. Again, I don't know if this is important because we really don't have an olives industry, Your Honor, in the Philippines. Olives are grow in dry climate. That's why you notice nasa Middle Eastern countries yan, Israel, southern Italy, Greece. These are countries where there's a pronounced dry season because olives as a tree do not survive in rainy weather. Nabubulok po yan. Live swine and live chicken, Your Honors. It says here, China 30% and Republic of Korea is 24 to 28% right now, current tariff. But RCEP tariff commitments is 20% by year 20, so 20 years. And to be honest, mga kapatid, Mr. President, we do not do importation of live swine or live chicken unless it is the mother stock, yung pambreeding, which usually only happens once every 10-year cycle of a farm. They import chickens and swine for breeder stock. Because lugi po sila. Kung yan ay ibebenta sa public markets yung live swine at live chicken, hindi po dinadala yan by airplane. Kasi masyado namang mahal. If you send it by air freight, it's too expensive. And if you send it by boat, by the time it comes here, as I mentioned in my speech, bagsak na po yung live weight niya. So lugi talaga. So kaya I have no problem with this live swine and live chicken kasi I talked to my producer friends and they said, natawa sila dahil wala namang magpapasok ng buhay na swine at chicken. Luging-lugi po yung pag pinasok nila dahil sobrang payat at mortality napakataas. Black pepper, we do have a small industry of black pepper here in Laguna, in Quezon, but it's a 15-year period. This is only for Republic of Korea. It's now 5%. It will be 0% in year 15. So matagal po matagal po ito. Palm nuts and kernels. This is Republic of Korea, 5%, and in 15 years, magsi-0% na po ito. But we're not really big on palm nuts and kernels. Usually in Malaysia, Indonesia po yan. Preserved sweet corn, chilies, and other capers. Sa Korea lang po, ang current tariff is 15%. In year 20, 16%. Sa year 20, magiging 15%. So, 1% lang po ang bawas. Preserved onions. Under the tariff lines of Korea, it's 16 to 32%. And year 20, it will be 15 to 20%. So there's a 20-year period. I will be 61. I'm just kidding. I will be 20 years from now. I'll be 73. Cornstarch po. Republic of Korea, 16%, 15% in year 20. Masyado mababa po yung pagbaba nitong percentage. And finally, feed for primates. Ito po and I had to ask twice what it really is. It really is feeds for monkeys. And I do not know, maybe there are countries that use this for testing, for experimentation. So it's a specialized feed. But obviously, we don't feed monkeys here in the Philippines. So, yun lamang po. It's 33 tariff lines, but only 15 agricultural products. And I'm glad that we put this on record, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, for the record, there are only 15 agricultural products which are allowed to come in through a reduced preferential tariffs.
Yes.
But the time frame varies from 15 years to 20 years.
That's correct.
And Mr. President, on the slide before, I noticed that even for live swine and live chicken, the current importation value, correct me if I'm wrong, is 0. Tama po ba? We're not importing any live swine and any live
We're
chicken.
not, sir. As I mentioned, it's
impractical.
It's impractical, yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
And I think the reason why they put that, Mr. President, live swine and live chicken, is because Indochina, when they trade with China, they only pass through land. They're all connected in one landmass. So I guess they did these tariff lines to protect, I guess, also over-exportation or importation of these live products in the Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, China area. But for us, it's impractical.
So, Mr. President, just to allay the fears of our farmers, especially the agriculture sector, the products that will be allowed are products that we don't produce here.
Absolutely
we don't
not.
import here.
Absolutely.
And the current agricultural products that we produce remain excluded. No?
That's
and
correct.
the tariff applicable to them is the same.
It's the same.
All right, Mr. President. Thank you for that clarification, Mr. President. And that definitely builds this representation's confidence on the RCEP. Mr. President, going to a more positive note on the new markets that RCEP will open to the Philippines, and I just want to concentrate on agriculture, being an agriculture-based country. What specific products can be beneficial to the Philippines in terms of exports? Just
So
the
many.
yeah, just the top of mind, the biggest product or the most potential products, Mr. President.
Yung mga, Mr. President, the big opportunity for many of the farmers is not fresh produce, but rather processed. For example, pineapple, canned pineapples. You have also fruit cocktails, durian, bananas, banana chips. It can be exported now to Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, China. China now, the requirement for durian, Your Honor, is so large that people all over the region are starting to plant durian. But as we all know, the best durian, with due respect to Malaysia and Singapore, I think we have one of the best. I had durian over the weekend and I had native durian from Davao, and it was absolutely like eating ice cream. So I think they love our durian. Durian is one of them. Papaya, Your Honors. There are several agricultural products that we can export, and these are some of them. And I say this because Del Monte and Dole that farm out tens of thousands of hectares of land actually employ hundreds of thousands of people. So these are the markets, these are the new markets for these products, including farmers, because solo papaya can be grown by small farmers. This can be done through cooperatives. And also fishery products. Mr. President, we now have a chance for our fish from Zamboanga, from General Santos, to be canned. And there's now, they allow, under the rules of origin, they can allow na, di ba, fishing from other areas of the region and can it in General Santos, and now we can sell it to the 15 countries or the 14 other countries, Your Honor.
And Mr. President, let me just emphasize again, all of these products will be exported to to the RCEP countries at zero tariffs.
Yes,
So meaning the products will be at lower price
yes.
and it will be affordable for the consumers to buy
Of those countries.
of those countries. No?
Yes.
So that's the potential of RCEP.
That's correct, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, another interesting item here in the presentation is, and I saw in the RCEP material, is trade in services, no? And also new markets for services. Mr. President, may I know how the Philippines can benefit on that particular item in RCEP? I understand from the briefing that aside from goods, services, practice of professions, this can be a new market for the Philippines amongst RCEP countries.
That's
So-
absolutely
So
correct.
meaning, for example, hairdressers can now go there and open up shop. Of course, notwithstanding their immigration policies, but that particular potential is now open to Filipinos who want to set up shop amongst RCEP countries.
Absolutely, Mr. President. Even legal services, auditing, bookkeeping services, taxation services, architectural services, hairdressing and beauty services, passenger freight transport services, audiovisual services, telecommunication services, financial services, gaming development services. I think the Filipinos are one of the best gamers and development of games, gaming industry. And of course, and when I say gaming industry, this is not the
Hindi po pogo.
hindi po to Pogo. Ito po yung
Pogo.
mga games na nilalaro sa
ano
ano yung mga computer
arcade,
games.
parang
Computer
arcade,
games.
arcade.
Opo. May mahilig dyan si Senator Tolentino. Balloons? gawa ng balloons. Sa kabila yun. Professional services, hotel management services, transport services, in air transport services, cargo, baggage handling services. Nako, lahat po ito kaya-kaya ng Pilipino.
So these are human resource, Mr. President.
Yeah.
And the Philippines being a service-oriented country, and we know that we have almost 3-4 million Filipinos abroad legally, and they say about 8 million if you count the unregistered. Being a service-oriented country, this presents an opportunity for us,
Yes.
for Filipinos, to be employed abroad and practice their craft amongst RCEP countries.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. President. Of course, barring that they take the necessary legal requirements. For example, if you're going to be an auditor in one of those countries, I believe you'd still have to take an auditing exam, also for legal services. Same vice versa, if they come here, they must pass the board to be able to pass, to be able to practice, if I'm not mistaken, for some professional services. But other than that, baggage handling, telecommunication service, everything that I mentioned, passenger freight and transport services, that's a big market for Filipinos, Mr. President.
Thank you for that, Mr. President, because it's also good to talk about services, because that opens up new avenues for us. Aside from exporting our goods, we can now export talent. Of course, we also have to look at our domestic needs, but the main point here is to open up new markets for our Filipinos, Mr. President.
That's correct, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to go to another point here in the presentation, MSMEs. And this is a big portion in the RCEP when I was reading the RCEP. Mr. President, may I know from our good Senate President, what are the specific examples on how MSMEs can benefit to that, can benefit through RCEP? What support will they get? Aside from, of course, the market that will open up, but is there any specific support our MSMEs will receive when we join RCEP?
Maybe putting it in the proper perspective, Your Honors, no, Mr. President, the exporters can also access, because of RCEP, they'll also access a huge free trade area with preferential tariffs under simplified trade rules. Clarity and transparency in rules are also important elements for businesses, for them to do business with ease. Parang ease of doing business natin, but in a larger scale, Your Honor. And many of I mentioned during my speech, a simple pastel of kamigin. Pastel de kamigin. It's one of my favorite. It's one of the reasons why I have high sugar in my blood. I used to eat that too much in Cagayan de Oro. But their small outfit based in Cagayan de Oro, kamigin, and then they moved their plant in Cagayan de Oro. When I spoke to the owners, they're also very excited to start putting up or exporting to other countries. And of course, having this type of new set of rules or a single set of rules for every country that I mentioned will have them do business with ease. And I mentioned earlier several, as I mentioned, the virgin coconut oil, potato corner. Potato corner, by the way, already is in Singapore, Thailand, Australia, United States, and Panama. So they want to also move to other RCEP ASEAN countries. Zeno, as I mentioned, is the entertainment software company. So basically, these are everything from pottery, handicraft, textiles na maliliit, from Antique, from Valenzuela. You know, Valenzuela had a booming export industry. A lot of the plants were there when they built even virgin coconut oil and packaging it from Valenzuela, coming from products, virgin coconut oil from Mindanao, repackaged in Valenzuela and sold all over the region. So these are just some of the simple examples. This KLT fruits, mango puree, guava puree. You've tried the mango in Thailand, Mr. President. I'm sure my dear colleague has tried the mangoes in Thailand. It may be good, but not as sweet as our Philippine mangoes. So pag puree yan, napakasarap ng ating mango puree. We even have purple jam, yung ube puree and dalandan puree. So all this now can be exported. And of course, not only that can be exported, but you can now import the equipment. Zero tariff, Your Honor. A lot of people don't understand that with the agriculture industry. It's not about planting alone. You must have the tractors. You must have the planting equipment. You must have the rotavator. You must have the moldboard. You must have the fertilizer. You must have the pesticides. Most of them are important. And because they're imported now with these trade barriers brought down, it will help these industries to be able to produce these outputs for export, Your Honor. So MSMEs will benefit greatly with this RCEP because it is a special provision in the RCEP. Wala po yan sa ibang ASEAN FTAs natin. The special mention of micro, small, and medium enterprises.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, the way I understand it, RCEP will help our MSMEs through, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. President, importation of equipment at zero tariff.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay. New markets for our MSMEs.
That's correct, Your
And
Honor.
also trade facilitation, Mr. President.
That's correct.
And Mr. President, in terms of trade facilitation, is the RCEP explicit on how to help our MSMEs facilitate trade? Is there a specific mechanism for MSMEs? And thank you, Mr. President, for mentioning Valenzuela. In fact, indeed, Mr. President, we have a lot of MSMEs there. It's a home of thousands of MSMEs raring to export their goods. And I know for a fact that we used to have a manufacturer there supplying Pottery Barn in the US,
Yes.
but because of stiff competition and also logistical issues, they had to close down. No? But definitely, these are just some of the potential areas Valenzuela and other LGUs can go into in order to maximize our participation in RCEP. But is there a specific mechanism insofar as trade facilitation is concerned for the MSMEs? Is there?
There are, I just completed. Other than enhanced market access, as you mentioned earlier, Your Honor, Mr. President, and imports, RCEP provides business-friendly mechanisms to facilitate trade through clear and transparent procedures. Philippine exports can also avail of flexible certification procedures. For example, certificate of origin, declaration of origin by approved exporter, declaration of origin by exporter producer. That will make it easier for businesses, especially MSMEs, to use FTAs, the FTA, and avail of preferential arrangement. It also provides a time-bound consultations to resolve issues. Dati kasi, Your Honor, wala pong, it wasn't time-bound. When there was an issue between an ASEAN Free Trade Agreement with another country, ang tagal before you can actually get together once again to discuss or renegotiate if ika nga. But now, correct me if I'm wrong, my dear ASEC is here, he's the chief negotiator. It is now time-bound, di ba? There is a mechanism.
Yes, sir.
What is the time-bound? How long?
60 days to respond.
Alam po ni
180
former
days
SP.
to resolve.
They have 60 days to respond and 180 days to resolve the issues and concerns on trade measures such as sanitary, phytosanitary measures, standards of technical regulations, conformity assessment procedures. The Economic Cooperation Facility of the FTA or the RCEP will also provide for capacity building and technical cooperation activities that will assist MSMEs in using the agreement, boost their overall competitiveness, as well as promote their goods and services through the FTA region. So, there are mechanisms, Your Honor, and these are clear mechanisms, also time-bound consultations. And I believe now every country that joined in RCEP, once it's ratified, they have an RCEP commission. There's actually an agency under their governments that is in charge of RCEP now. So parang ano tayo, it's a bigger, more massive ASEAN. Di ba we see ASEAN lanes in airports? So these are now RCEP, it's a new area now called RCEP.
Thank you, Mr. President.
May
So,
I-
Mr. President, I understand that procedures will be simplified. There will be a mechanism for redress and resolution. The trade facilitation, Mr. President, falls within the hands of the Bureau of Customs, no? And we know for a fact that the Bureau of Customs is also encountering many challenges now and in the past and probably forever, no, Mr. President. Is the Bureau of Customs ready to face the simple trade facilitation within the RCEP commitments. Yun po yung challenge ko dito, Mr. President. We can specify everything in RCEP, especially trade facilitation, automation, but we all have doubts whether our Bureau of Customs is up to task or up to par in terms of implementing our commitments. And Mr. President, I'm sure they will say yes, Mr. President. No?
I was about
Sigurado
to say
ako.
yes.
What will happen if, for example, trade facilitation fails? No? I'll give a scenario. It fails. Some of our agencies cannot keep up with our commitments with RCEP. What is, number one, what can be the sanction imposed on the Philippines? And number two, how can us, in the legislature, exert our jurisdiction so that government agencies will follow our commitment?
That last question first, and you answer the others about customs.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
I'll answer
two
the
questions. What
question.
sanctions and how can we
Yeah.
compel government agencies to
A very
commit?
good question, and this is exciting because the Senate President and I have a new innovation so that the sectors that may or will be affected, or those who are anxious about being affected, their concerns can be addressed. He agreed to set up a special oversight committee on RCEP that can meet quarterly at the minimum or as often as possible, so that each agency that was a negotiator for the past 10 years and is a signatory to this agreement, not just DI and DTA, but also customs, which is your concern. He'll answer the customs. That's his favorite later. Okay. So there will be an oversight committee. Then you can join the oversight hearings and ask the agencies. We have already ratified. How do we get there? What is the roadmap? What is the budget? Are you doing this? With or without this FTA, what will happen? All of that. Because we are at the tail end of the process of ratification. We were not here during the 10 years of negotiations of the two administrations, but we have to ratify, if we will have the numbers, as a legislature. But we have the Special Oversight Committee, which I think never happened in any agreement before. I would like to do that perhaps for the Paris Agreement, but I failed to do that. But here, addressing the concerns of, let's say, the Federation of Free Farmers, the Alianza Group of Orly Ordonez, Attorney Ing Xiong, the Montemayor brothers, and many others who joined us during the hearings, we said we will commit to have the Special Oversight Committee. And so it won't be just the chair or the vice chairs, but any senator can bring to task the agencies that are mandated to comply with even protection measures, safety net measures for every sector that could be affected. And as we said, the others will have to run for 5 or 20 years. Some of us may not be here, but the others may still be here upon re-election. So we pass it on to those who can still be here, that the oversight function of the Senate was created so that we see that the sectors will be protected and enhanced, and that the GDP growth that is projected by doctorate holders who said that this is good for us will really be complied with. Okay, the customs question will be answered by the Senate President.
I'll get the more difficult question. According to the customs, and they're here, it's the newly minted commissioner is with us today. He just stepped out for a call. He's talking to the Secretary of Finance. But the Deputy Secretary is here, Maronilla. And also from our Chief Negotiator, who's head of the RCEP Joint Committee. Apparently, there's an RCEP Joint Committee for each country. He's the head of the Joint Committee, and it's tasked to monitor the implementation of the RCEP agreement together with the procedures of customs procedures that you mentioned, Your Honor. So there is a mechanism. The gentleman is right here. He's in charge of that. His head will roll if he doesn't monitor properly. Just kidding. But as mentioned by the Senate President Pro Tempore, we in the Senate are really going to put our money where our mouth is and basically set up the special committee. Of course, the key committee chairman will be there. Of course, Ways and Means, Agri, the minority floor leader will be part of that, and many of us who will be monitoring closely the guidelines that we've set to make sure that these are implemented properly.
Thank you, Mr. President. Definitely, Mr. President, the oversight is a very important aspect to make sure that we remain steadfast to our commitment to RCEP, especially for MSMEs, Mr. President. The big companies, they will have brokers, they will have accountants who can help them, but the MSMEs, which is a key feature of this bill, we need to make sure that trade facilitation is also convenient for them, because the MSMEs cannot hire a lot of professionals to help them. So, Mr. President, one of the attractions, at least for my, in my point of view, is trade facilitation and simplification of trade facilitation for MSMEs. And definitely we should exert, as the Senate, we should exert everything. After ratifying this, we should exert everything to make sure that that the agencies are committed and they implement the proper reforms so that RCEPs will be fully felt by our constituents, Mr. President.
Mr. President, just to add to the BOC issue, they've come up with a national single window which connects to the 10 ASEAN member states. So one-stop shop for processing and filing of trading documents for, I guess now it would be RCEP, if there will be an RCEP trading window. But also, I know where you're coming from and I know where you want to go on this issue. And I'm happy that Secretary Pascual is here. I mean, the good secretary is so busy, but he sees how important RCEP is for the creation and the, I'd say, expansion of the MSME program. They have a program under their department, which is the Exports and Investments Development Program. So maybe we can ask the good secretary, while he's listening intently today with his undersecretaries, to come up with an easier one-stop shop system for MSMEs. Tama po kayo. If you're a small little, again, a small little basket weaving cooperative from Bukidnon who wants to sell their products to the ASEAN, or better yet, Australia, New Zealand, there must be an agency that they can go to within the DTI to help them market all this and help them sell it and export it abroad. So I agree with you, Mr. President. I agree with the good gentleman from Valenzuela, and I'm happy. That's why I'm happy the Senate, the Secretary rather, is here to hear that we can come up with a new, maybe program for RCEP countries, especially with MSMEs.
Thank you, Mr. President, for that assurance. And definitely, we should really exert, all of us, the executive, legislative, should exert everything we can to fully utilize the potential of RCEP. I think this came a long way. In fact, the discussion here in the Senate took us many, many months. And it's just right that we see to it that the full potential of RCEP is felt by our constituents, Mr. President.
I would like to add for MSMEs, Mr. President, since I was the principal author in my second term of the Magna Carta for micro, small, and medium enterprises. So that's so close to my heart. But this answer, which I'm about to read, really focuses on MSMEs and their access to the global supply chain. Aside from the enhanced market access, RCEP will also provide business-friendly mechanisms as well as clear and transparent procedures to facilitate trade for companies, especially for MSMEs, to do business and conduct trade in the region. This will facilitate the integration of businesses into the global value chain. For example, the rules of origin of the RCEP agreement allows companies to use inputs from the region so that the final goods receive preferential tariff treatment. So this opens opportunities for MSMEs to provide these inputs to larger companies. Another example, since the RCEP agreement applies less import duties on goods from the region, parties can also buy from RCEP parties because of the cost advantage the lower tariffs provide. So this gives MSMEs a good opportunity to sell their goods to consumers in other RCEP parties. And for existing manufacturers, like for electronic products, they can expand their operations in the Philippines and cater to the growing demand in the region, such as electronic products for automobiles and computers. There's also an e-commerce platform for MSMEs. Yes, and there's a long answer here, but maybe you already know that. So more than cooperation and technical assistance, e-commerce, there's a whole chapter on e-commerce that encourages trade facilitation through paperless trading and cashless transactions. So this is something that will be new for many of our MSMEs, and perhaps capacity building also for MSMEs is in order, and perhaps DTI could have a special capacity building program in the coming years so that our MSMEs can avail of this e-commerce provision in the RCEP.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, for those clarifications. Mr. President, on another topic, jobs, job generation, Mr. President. Of course, new markets will create new opportunities for our countrymen. I heard the good Senate President mentioned earlier that exports, there's a lot of downstream benefits when these markets open up. For example, logistics, drivers, pati pahenante, Mr. President, these are part of job creation. Mr. President, I would like to ask how many jobs do you see can be created by RCEPs?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm excited to announce there are several studies that have been made on the issue, particularly on the effects or the good effects of RCEP. And this particular study was done for DOLE, Department of Labor and Employment. And this study, the ADB and Economic Working Paper Series, the benefits of trade policies such as RCEP reflects shifts in employment from low productivity to high productivity jobs. And it's estimated that by 2031, the projected additional jobs, conservative po ito, is 1.4 million Filipinos, mostly in the service sector. According to the DTI Commission study, imagine 1.4 million Filipinos. And this is as follows, about 308,000, this is disaggregated as follows. Agriculture, 308,490 jobs. Industries, about 77,683 jobs. Services, about 991,000 jobs, more or less. So it's almost about 1.4 million, Your Honor. So that's a lot of Filipinos living a better life.
Well, thank you for that information, Mr. President, and that's critical information in the discussion of RCEP. Job generation is tangible. Jobs are tangible. And aside from opening markets, it's good to note that there are concrete, tangible jobs that will be created in the next 9 years. Actually, it's not so far off, no? Until 2031. And that will help improve our unemployment rate, especially after the pandemic. And really, I'm quite happy to hear that the potential for job creation is quite high for RCEP. Mr. President, lastly, Mr. President, on the topic of trade deficit, Mr. President, we all know that our country is in a perennial trade deficit. And the trade deficit of our country in 2021 is about 43 billion pesos, Mr. President. How can RCEP improve our trade standing? Will it, I'm assuming that RCEP will have a positive trade balance. How much is that trade balance? And how can it reduce our perennial trade deficit that we are experiencing now, Mr. President?
Well, I'm listening to my colleague, our Senate President Pro Tempore. It's not really a magic pill that we can close in the trade deficit. Definitely, There are certain industries that still need imports like steel, cement, although we have cement industries here, even food, fertilizer, oil and oil products, fertilizers part byproduct of oil. We really have to import that. But compared to coming to what or going back to what the Senate President pro tempore said, we ratified that FTA with 4 non-EU countries. That's Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Iceland. We used to be in a trade deficit with them before, but now we're trade surplus because those markets open to us. Before, they would send us their cheese, their milk, their chocolates, Swiss chocolates, Toblerone, and all that. So natin kinakain yan. But now, our markets have opened up for them, and we've sent them tropical fruits, we've sent them fruit cocktails, we've sent them all these other products. Kaya, looking at our experience with these 4 European countries, I feel that we will do better in this trade deficit. I think we'll improve our trade. We'll lessen our trade deficit and improve our trade with these other countries.
Would like to mention, thank you again for mentioning EFTA.
That's your baby.
You were majority
That's your
leader
baby.
then. So on sectoral effects on export, I think that's also the question of the Ways and Means Chair. By the way, you're a member of the Oversight Committee that will be created. So under Scenario 1, this is a study of Dr. Coro Raton. Exports of electronic equipment substantially increased relative to the baseline from $17.66 million in 2022 to $264 million in 2031. Kung totoo ito, ay ang laki. Exports of machinery equipment improved from 2.73 million in 2022 to 25.45 million in 2031. It's very optimistic. I hope it comes true. Exports of vegetables, fruits, and nuts increased from 2.85 million 2022 to 28.21 million, while exports of other food products from 1.5 million to 19.98 million over the same period. It's a very, but this was studied. This
Yeah.
is not just, this has been documented.
Yep.
Yeah,
So, Mr. President,
for those who will be here in 2031, I don't expect to be here. We should have the same RCEP review in, malay mo, bumalik ka pa. So,
So, Mr. President, I understand that with RCEP, the country will generate a trade surplus of about $200 million above.
Certain industries, yes.
No, on certain industries, on different scenarios, but definitely it's not going to be deficit. No?
No.
I mean, we're not going into this agreement to exacerbate our trade
I don't
deficit.
think so, Your Honor. Remember that company that I introduced to you last week? I brought
Yes,
this
Mr.
American
President.
group, EVT. You know, when they found out that we were going to be part of the RCEP, they studied it further. This actually is sweetener on the cake. It's icing on the cake. You know? Because according to them, they're not just going to export now to the US, but now if they manufacture the EVT, the electric vehicles in the Philippines, they can sell now to the 14 other countries, including Australia and the ASEAN countries, particularly on the public utility vehicles running on electric motors. So that's the beauty of it. And now they said that they can source now the batteries from China, assemble it all in the Philippines,
Correct, Mr.
sell it to Japan. It's an easier trade route. So I'm really hopeful this is going to be good for the country. We, as an export, look at our location. We are center. We can sell to America. We can sell to Australia, New Zealand, Japan. We're even better off. And I was telling this to our Honorable Senate President Pro Tem. Countries like Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, which are all landlocked. They have no port. They have to go through Vietnam or Thailand to go through the ports to other countries. Tayo, we have ports everywhere. And Central Luzon, which Valenzuela used to be part of, or still part of, is an adopted part of Central Luzon, will benefit immensely with this trade.
Thank you, Mr. President, for that answer. Well, definitely, Mr. President, I'm also very hopeful with RCEP and looking at the benefits as well as the downside. In fact, the downside is quite minimal and well managed. I'm very, very optimistic with this agreement, Mr. President. And let me just give credit where credit is due. Let me give credit to the negotiators of RCEP, putting the interests of our farmers ahead. Magaling ho talaga yung mga negotiators, lalo na ho yan si Asek Hepti, Mr. President. Magaling ho yan si Asek Hepti, taga Valenzuela ho yan.
Kaya pala friendly interpellation eh.
Taga Valenzuela pala. Yes,
Kaya ho magaling ho yan,
Galing
Mr.
siya.
President. Hindi Venezuela, Mr. President. Valenzuela.
Meron akong pahabol, alam kong tapos na kayo. Natutuwa lang kami ni Senate President dahil ito figures na ito, we cannot argue with figures. Pandemya pa ito between the Philippines and the EFTA countries led by Switzerland. Nag-increase, bagamat maliit 2.40% from 802 million in 2018 when we ratified it here, naging 821 million in 2019. Tapos it further grew to by 101.49 million in 2020 and 89 million in 2021 despite the COVID-19 pandemic. Dati ay trade deficit. Naging surplus, growing and growing. And that's just 2019 with 3 years of pandemic. So, sana yung ating lucky charm ay magpatuloy sa RCEP.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, I thank our good Senate President, our Senate President pro tempore for clarifying a lot of the items that I have, and I also commend and thank the negotiating team of PTI. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much to our chairperson of the Committee on Ways and Means for the very good questions propounded. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gatchalian, Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, next to interpellate is the distinguished gentleman from San Juan, Senator Jinggoy Estrada. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Gentleman from San Juan, the birthday boy is recognized.
Happy birthday.
The better.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And thank you very much for your amazing video message that was played during my celebration.
Is that, Mr. President?
The good one.
The good. Thank you, Mr. President. Because I thought that was me, Mr. President.
Anyway, Mr. President, I just would like to put on record that I am not against this particular treaty. In fact, I am quite supportive of this treaty, but I still have to ask some clarificatory questions, if I may.
Yes, we'll be honored, Mr. President.
And
The Chairman of the Committee on Labor.
I do not know if my colleagues who interpolated ahead of me had already asked these questions because I was not listening. Anyway,
It's all
Mr.
right, Mr.
President,
President, we're willing to answer once again.
can we spread into the record the rationale behind this agreement?
Well, to make a summarize and put it in a concise form or manner, this agreement, Mr. President, is really about establishing, and let me repeat as what I mentioned in the speech. It's about establishing a clear, stable, predictable rules in doing trade and investments in the region so that it'll be more convenient and competitive for our businesses and investors to be integrated in the global economy. And the importance of this cannot be denied or emphasized because we're going to go into a trade agreement with almost 30% of the world's population, almost 30% of the world's economy, GDP, almost 30% of global trade. So napakalaki. Dito lang sa 15 bansa. And it will be, it's also a region which gives us a huge amount of foreign direct investment, accounting, and of course, countries like Japan, Korea, China, and Australia, New Zealand or sources of foreign direct investment. And they're looking for other markets to build. Alam mo, mahal na po mag-manufacture sa kanila. Kaya naghahanap din po sila ng manufacturing hub. Kaya pag nakapasok po tayo sa RCEP, we can also get them to come to the Philippines, manufacture here without violating any of their trade rules, because we are now part of a larger free trade arrangement, which is the RCEP. So napakaganda po at I'd say practical nitong arrangement na ito, which we cannot get from our ASEAN +1 FTAs.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, when did the negotiations for the RCEP agreement start?
2012, Mr. President.
May I add that this was started during the Aquino administration in 2012.
It was?
Negotiations, 2012, negotiations were,
Started.
it was launched with the ASEAN ministers
All right.
in 2012. And negotiations happened from 2012 till the time that the Duterte administration
Took over.
signed it in 2020. So it, 8 years of negotiations. Then it was transmitted to the Senate and hearings and TWGs ensued. As I mentioned with Senator Pimentel, then chairman of the Committee on Foreign Relations. And eventually, in this administration, it's Senator Marcos as chairman of the Committee on Foreign Relations, and then eventually the Senate President and yours truly.
May I know what happened during the Duterte administration? Why wasn't it ratified here in the Senate?
Oh, I was a congressman then, so the Senate President, who was majority leader, will answer that.
We actually ran out of time at that time, and there were other considerations that I will tell you maybe in executive session. Is basically the next administration wanted to study the measure further, and so we decided to take it up in this administration.
What was the status before?
It was pending. Our distinguished minority floor leader was the sponsor, and it was pending on plenary for votation.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the 15 RCEP participating countries signed the agreement in November 2020. At that time, when we were still reeling from the COVID-19 pandemic. In your own opinion, Mr. President, have we recovered from the pandemic?
GDP-wise, I believe we have. We've gotten a very good GDP growth rates of 7.6% recently, although I'm sad to say that our inflation is still high at 8.6%. 8.7%. Alam mo, ideally, dapat mas mababa yung inflation sa GDP para maramdaman ng taong bayan yung growth. Pero yun nga, mataas ang bilihin. So the President with our economic team is here, part of the economic team. They're doing their best to bring down the cost of commodities. But if you ask me my personal opinion, sir, yes, we've
Fully recovered?
not fully recovered,
Partially.
but we've recovered tremendously. We could be worse. Other countries in the ASEAN are still lagging behind. We are considered the VIP now, yung VIP, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines. We're like the darling of the region in terms of our phenomenal growth rate. So, of course, many of that has to do with OFW remittances, its spending. So we need to pump up our manufacturing sector. That's why this is very important.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
President. Mr. President, I think Senator Rizal would.
Yes, Senator Tiberos.
Salamat, Mr. President, with the indulgence of the good gentleman from San Juan and our co-sponsors. Kaugnay lang po, Mr. President, nung naunang itinanong ng good gentleman from San Juan sa ating co-sponsors, kung bakit hindi pa natin na-ratify yung RCEP in the previous Congress. Just a quick addition to that answer, kasi miyembro din po ako ng Senado nung panahong iyon, Mr. President, and out of acknowledgement nung abiding concerns na ni-raise noon at nire-raise hanggang ngayon ng ating agricultural sector, and out of appreciation din sa Senado na noon ay nakinig, pinagbigyan na magkaroon ng mas maraming mahabang panahon para masagot ng executive yung
Yes.
mga concerns na ito bago magdesisyon ang Senado. I recall, Mr. President, na one of the reasons, and I would believe one of the major reasons na hindi pa nag-ratify ang Senado noon ay bilang pagbibigay daan dun sa mga seryoso at maraming concerns ng agricultural sector about the RCEP na at the proper time, pag turn ko na makapag-interpellate din sa ating good co-sponsors, i-raise ko bilang mga abiding concerns pa rin nila. So just for the record, Mr. President, at maraming salamat sa good gentleman from San Juan at sa ating mga co-sponsors. Salamat, Mr. President.
Mr. President, the Deputy Minority Floor Leader is absolutely correct. That's why I mentioned earlier we had to study the measure further in deference to the agri-sector. The sponsor knows that very well. The former Senate President was a sponsor at the time. He was the Foreign Affairs Chief or Committee Chair. We still needed to do some, at that time, follow-up meetings and consultations with the agri-sector. And we listened. And we actually put up a large set of guidelines and instructions under the committee that we will approve. Under the resolution that we will approve. Nandito na po ito. Magiging part of the Senate record na ito. And one day, kung may magtatanong, ibabanggit ko po ito, marami po ito, na guidelines na gagawin po natin, nakbang, para mapaganda ang agricultural sector. Hindi po sila mapapabayaan.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, would you know why India decided to back out of the RCEP negotiations in 2019?
It's in my notes, boss.
Because,
Give me 1 second.
We have read reports that India was concerned about increased trade deficits with countries it has foreign trade agreements with the lack of safeguards, allowing it to respond to import surges and the threat of import competition in agriculture, inadequate market access for service exports, as well as greater mobility of people to deliver them. Are these true, Mr. President?
I wrote some notes. Give me a second, Mr. President. I wrote some notes on it. Yeah. Yes, I asked the same question, Mr. President. And first of all, let's be honest about it. It's also geopolitical. India and China don't really get along. And they have their own, for example, Quad, they have their own defense agreement with other countries on trade. Ayaw talaga nila mapasama sa China kasi they're similarly situated. If I'm not mistaken, India is a larger, parang in-overtake na yata ang Indian population ng China. This year, Your Honor, India is about to be larger than China in terms of population because of the one-child policy ng China. Naiwanan na sila ng India. India is growing exponentially. So, obviously, they don't want to be flooded with Chinese products in their country. So, it's also a bit of geopolitical, there's a bit of geopolitical reasons there. But yes, they noted reluctance to trade with China, fearing the Indian market will be flooded by products from China.
Ano ba pwede natin import sa bansang India?
Flying carpet then.
Persian rugs?
Spices, pharmaceuticals. No, I'm just kidding. But they're not part of RCEP, but we can, of course, sell steel. Even tropical, well, I don't know. I think they also have tropical fruits, but I don't think they have durian. I don't know if they're a papaya, and they have a very healthy sugar industry. So
May I add?
May you
because
add?
I
You
have
know
a
any? You know much about India?
I have a personal
I love Indian
experience.
food.
No, because the Patnongon Multipurpose Cooperative cotton processing facility that I helped support and set up through the PhilFida was funded by Philippine government funds, imported equipment, technology, and expertise from India. So they're an expert in cotton and they plant cotton, and that's something that I'd like us to do more. And so we started planting cotton in some parts of Antique. We set up a cotton processing facility so that we don't import cotton from China. And now we are planting and we do ginning and spinning in patnongon in Antique from imported Indian equipment of a cotton facility. So that's how that's my micro answer of a small enterprise, that of a cooperative in a small town in Antique.
Thank you, Mr. President. Even though India is not a member of RCEP, I just would like to ask, ano ba yung export natin sa India naman?
Oh my gosh.
Top
We have-
five. Top
Ito,
five.
we export this?
Ito export, ito import.
Okay, we export to them, unwrought gold. Gold. Also housing, storage units are the same as housing, refined copper. Yes, because we have as you know, we have a huge mining industry in the Philippines. So this is copper, digital monolithic integrated circuits, and lead waste and scrap. That's what we export.
Lead waste?
Scrap.
What are they going to do with the scrap? I mean,
That's exactly what is here.
scrap? What do you mean by scrap?
Oh my gosh,
What,
I have
junk?
no clue, Mr. President. Mr. President, maybe junk or junk scrap metal, the lead waste.
Are we exporting junk materials?
Why not? So we don't import. I know we used to import junk materials, but what they export to us are on the flip side, light petroleum oils and preparation thereof. Of course, medicines.
So yeah.
Oh, malaki India sa medicines. Yung mga produkto ni Ralph Recto, galing India yun. Sherwin? Meat of bovine animals, cara beef and all. Ito. Yan na.
Anyway, Mr. President, going to my next question. Mr. President, do we have enough
Motorcycles also.
motorcycles from
India,
India?
they come here.
Are they durable?
Maraming gumagamit sa kanila ng motorcycles dito.
Well, I'm not a motorcycle rider. Maybe we can ask the presiding officer if it's durable.
The good one is Indian motorcycles.
I think yung Bajaj, no, scooters, Mahindra, and some generators, yung Kirloskar, we are importing also from India.
Oh.
Ginagamit nila sa 5.6 po. 5.6 motorcycle. Okay, I'd like to strike that off the record, Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. President, do we have enough infrastructure, investment in labor training and education to maximize our membership in this free trade agreement? Have we successfully cut bureaucratic red tape and improved the ease and cost of doing business in the country?
That's the whole idea, Your Honor, Mr. President. It now opens our MSMEs, our manufacturers, our exporters to a larger group of countries. But at the same time, we have to come up with a better framework than what is the existing free trade agreements and ASEAN free trade agreements. So talagang we now have a mechanism, and there is a RCEP committee, and RCEP committee, no?
Some of the programs.
And some of the programs that we'll be doing under the RCEP, which will be the doing business in free trade areas, regional interactive platform and Philippine Exporters Plus, inclusive innovation industrial strategy, yung ease of doing business, shared service facilities, and the Philippine Export Competitiveness Program. That's only local programs po ito. But the RCEP alone as an organization, they will set up an RCEP secretariat. We're the only ones not included in the RCEP secretariat as of the moment, as we have not ratified it. But once we ratify, there will be an RCEP secretariat composed of all 15 nations. I believe this good gentleman behind me will be one of the lead proponents. And they will always be discussing how to improve our import-exports with RCEP countries.
Okay, in line with your questioning, Mr. President, assuming ma-delay itong pag-ratify ng agreement ng RCEP, how would this affect our consumers?
Well, Mr. President, the longer we delay, the more markets will be taken over by our neighbors.
Will this mean that our consumers would lose access to more affordable imports, Mr. President?
That's one. Also, our exports, we can lose markets for our exports. If you look at it from the import-export point of view, many of our manufacturers here import their product. For example, packaging is imported. Di ba po? So if we're not part of the RCEP and we can't get it from ASEAN and we want to get it from China or another country, may taripa po yun. Mas mahal po yung packaging na yan pagpasok po dito sa atin. Unlike yung nasa RCEP na po tayo, mas mura yung pagpasok sa atin dito, pag-export natin, mabibenta natin na mas mura at mas affordable for other countries. There's a competitive edge.
So we will be at the losing end.
Oh,
in short.
definitely, Mr. President.
How can you quantify the loss, Mr. President?
We can.
May I mention this, Mr. President? Because all the ASEAN nations are already members of the RCEP,
Except-
along with all ASEAN nations. Pilipinas na lang hindi nagratipika. Now, and the other big nations which are part of RCEP, namely China, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea, if there is a product, I will not name what product, let's say that a neighboring ASEAN nation has, and we produce it and they produce it. And if both businesses want to export to Japan, for example, and that is covered by RCEP, then ang pagpasok, let's say, ng business galing sa bansang Laos papuntang Japan ay mababa ang taripa kaysa sa pagpasok ng parehong produkto na galing Pilipinas na hindi miyembro ng RCEP, bibilin siyempre ng mga Japanese yung one-on-one parehong produkto, yung mas mura galing sa RCEP nation kaysa sa atin na may pinapataw na taripa.
Ito ba, Mr. President, quantifying what was mentioned by Senator Laura Legarda, there's a decrease in real GDP growth by negative 26%. At 0.26%, negative 0.26% decrease in real GDP and missed opportunities to increase GDP by 2%. Ang laki nun, 2%. That's from 7.6 maging 9% if we join and we get into the bandwagon on import and exporting of our products. Kaya po, Mr. President, Your Honor, industry and business organizations express support. Ang dami. PhilExport, Confederation of Wearable Exporters of the Association of the Philippines, Banana Growers Exporters Association of the Philippines, Federation of Philippine Industries. I think today, lumabas din yung Go Negosyo, tapos ECOP, Employers Confederation of the Philippines, and then one more pa, yung kay Sergio Luis Ortiz. Anong grupo nila? Sergio Luis. Exporters Development Council. Ito, Manufacturers Association. Tuna Manufacturers Association. Canned Sardines Manufacturers Association. IT Business Process Association. BPO po ito. Philippine Chamber of Commerce. Semiconductors and Electronics Industries of the Philippines Foundation. Australian New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, ECCP, European Chamber of Commerce, AmCham, Philippines, American Chamber of Commerce, Pamuri, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Korean Chamber of Commerce, Japanese Chamber of Commerce, and many, many more. And the reason why they're supporting this, di ba may mga planta po ito? Ito mga Chambers of Commerce, may mga planta po sila dito. They want access also to the inputs or their parts from these countries. And once they get access to the imports of these parts from these other countries and assemble it in the Philippines, they can now re-export this to the 15 countries. So, ang napakalaki. Meaning they'll even have a chance to expand their business. They'll have a chance to hire more workers. Talagang ang laki ng effect po nito. Labor, the gentleman is the chairman of the Committee on Labor. He knows very well how important setting up of a factory alone. Yung dinala ko po dito ng Amerikano, parang may confirmed na po tayong commitment sa kanya. He's planning to hire 2,000 Filipinos to manufacture electronic vehicles in Clark and export it out of Subic. So, ang ganda po. I think the gains are so large that it's a wasted opportunity.
So, would you agree with me na yung RCEP makakatulong sa inflation natin?
Well, yes, because
Ibaba yung inflation.
ibaba yung inflation,
Yes.
definitely. Because also we'll be able to get cheaper products for assembly in the Philippines. Magiging mas mura.
Correct. Mr. President, from an investor's standpoint or point of view, would this affect our country's image as a potential destination for foreign investment, since firms here in the country would not have the same access to the RCEP market as firms in signatory states?
Absolutely, Mr. President. They must be thinking there's something wrong with the Philippines if we're the only ones left out. It's like North Korea. We'll be isolationists. They'll probably be scratching their head. And, and with due respect to the President, galing po kami ng Japan last week. I was, as you all know, I was part of the presidential delegation. Bukang bibig po ng Prime Minister ng Japan, bukang bibig po ng mga Japanese manufacturers na nakipag-meeting po sa amin on the 3rd day and the 4th day. We're all about RCEP. When will we be joining? Because they already have manufacturing plants here, Marubeni, Mitsui, Sumitomo. Siyempre gusto din po nilang maka-import ng mga murang parts to be able to assemble in the Philippines to re-export to other countries. Yes, so yes, Your Honor, to make a long story short, it will affect us because they'd rather go to Vietnam. They'd rather go to Thailand because they'll have a bigger market. If they put their plant there, their plant now, the producer of their plant, will have a bigger 14-nation market.
Right. How long after this, after the deposit of instrument of ratification, will the Philippines be able to participate under the trading environment?
I'm told 60 days po
60 days?
after ratification.
All right, that's good.
I would like to add, Mr. President, because the good chairman of the Labor Committee was asking about the importance of RCEP with regards to global FDIs. This was mentioned earlier, I say it again. It covers 29% of global trade. Halos 1/3 ng lahat ng kalakalan sa buong mundo ay nasa RCEP nations. And a market of 2.3 billion people. With regards to foreign direct investment destination, accounting for 33% of global inward parating na FDI and 47% global outward FDI. So between the ASEAN nations and the RCEP nations which are not ASEAN, halos ito na ang 1/3 at kalahati ng mundo. It accounts for 50% of the global manufacturing output, 50% of global automotive products, 70% of electronics, and the main GVC hubs of China, South Korea, Japan, etc. So, by the sheer size alone and the extent of economic activities, I believe the Philippines could not afford to be a part of RCEP. And we are the only one in ASEAN who has not yet ratified RCEP. Now, that is let's go, that's a macro. Yeah. Sa micro, mas alam nyo siguro to, mahilig ka ba kumain ng tsokolate? Yun.
It shows.
Okay. So, ganito po, maikli lang. So, parang may nag-thrive na ngayon na chocolate industry, di ba? Kasi marami nagtatanim ng kakao. Under the ASEAN-Japan FTA, parte tayo ng ASEAN, merong pinapataw na 21.3% na taripa pagpasok ng ating Philippine-made chocolate sa Japan. Sa ilalim ng GPEPA, may 21.3%. Ngunit, pag sumali tayo sa RCEP, ang tsokolating Pilipinas sa year 16 ay 0% na ang taripa ang pasok doon. Kung hindi tayo pumasok, saan ba may kakao, may tsokolate? Sabi mo na, tsokolating Indonesia na lang.
Indonesia,
O di,
Malaysia.
ang tsokolating Indonesia, dulot ng kanilang pagtanim ng kakao, ay walang pinapataw na taripa, tayo 21.3%. Kung nasa Japan ka at gusto mong bumili ng tsokolate mula sa ASEAN, bibili ka ba ng tsokolating Indonesia na mas murang 21.3% or masyado mong nasasarapan sa tsokolating Pilipinas na maski mas mahal by 21.3%, bibili ka pa rin dito. Pero 16 years pa naman yan. Pero maski na, 16 years can go on. Oo. Pero
Just
may
a gradual
decrease.
May I just add also,
Okay, thank
Your
you.
Honor, Mr. President, and I think Senate President Pro Tem, I just want to put this in proper perspective. Your Honors, this market is larger than the Canada, US, Mexico market. Anong tawag dun? That's NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. That's Canada, US, and Mexico, the three countries. This is far larger in terms of population and market.
Mas malaki
GDP.
itong RCEP.
Mas malaki po ito. Maliit po yun compared to this.
Ba't di natin sila isama?
Ano po?
Ba't di natin sila isama para labo-labo na?
Ibang, iba naman sila. Iba naman ang gusto nilang taripa doon.
Anyway, Mr. President, in the previous Congress, the amendments to the Public Service Act, Retail Trade Liberalization Act, and the Foreign Investment Act were passed. Is it safe to say that the possible gains from these will go to waste if we delay the ratification of the RCEP any further?
It is possible because it will send mixed signals, Your Honor, Mr. President, to the investors to the Philippines that we're not really ready for global, the global market. So yes, Your Honor, the answer is yes.
And in the previous Congress, the Senate did not give its concurrence due to concerns over RCEP's impact on the agriculture and fishery sector.
Yes, as
During
mentioned
the
earlier by the
briefing-
Minority Floor Leader.
Yes,
Deputy
during the briefings and technical working groups, it has been revealed that since then, the DTI and the DA never met with the agri-fishery sector to discuss concerns over the agreement. Why is that so, Mr. President?
Well, that was the issue that they brought out, the lack of consultation. Kaya I don't want to talk about the past. Siyempre, the chairperson is here, former Senate President, and I don't want to cast any aspersions. He did a good job in defending it. As a matter of fact, several hours were spent in debates here in the floor by the good gentleman from Cagayan de Oro, my neighbor in Cagayan de Oro. But what we did was to be more patient with them, and we decided to call for a hearing that really catered only to the oppositors. And we had a hearing, a whole day hearing, and they discussed it point by point. What the issues were, pinasagot namin point by point sa DTI tsaka sa agri sector. Nasagot naman po lahat. Thank God.
So are they supportive of this bill? Those oppositors before,
Well,
are they now supporting this treaty?
Mr. President, I don't want to say that they're all supportive because
Or there's
there's
meron
holdouts
pa silang
there.
mga concerns?
Ang problema kasi sa kanila po, or ang problema ng industriya, it's also, there's still holdouts from the GATT, General Agreements of Tariff and Trade, itong WTO. Medyo dun sa WTO, they blame the agriculture sector blames their situation now because of the WHO. But I can point to other countries where during the opening of their markets, like Brazil, like India, during the WTO, they improved their sugar industry. They improved their corn industry, the grains industry. As a matter of fact, William Dar, former secretary of the DA, used to be under the head of the grains program of India. And now, it's one of the biggest export industries of India. Hindi ko nga maintindihan ano nangyari sa atin dito. So, the problem of agriculture in the country is, the problems are a multitude, Mr. President. If you ask me, it's not only about RCEP, it's not only about WTO, it's the lack of inputs given or the lack of support given by government, but also, in a way, it's also our lack of farmers to embrace new technologies, innovations. I was sad to hear today, there's a big debate, Mr. President, and it's a real issue, no? There was a big debate today, it was in the newspapers, on the farmers complaining about the hybrid rice program of the government because they want to use inbred rice so that they can produce their own rice seedlings instead of bibili po sila ng hybrid rice. Okay, there's two sides of that coin. Correct? With inbred rice, you can have your own rice seeds and plant it. But you have to remember that using inbred rice, your production will always go down. Kasi inbred yan eh. So by the second development, second crop, second harvest, second planting of inbred rice, pababa na pababa yung production mo. Unlike hybrid, although bibili ka mahal, magkano yan isang bag? Siguro 4,000 yung isang bag ng hybrid rice. Magkano? 5,000 ang hybrid rice seedlings. Pero yung production mo po, doble. Kung ang inbred rice ay gagamitin mo, will produce about 60 kabans. Yung hybrid rice can produce about 100 kabans. So the amount of kabans, the increase in the amount of kabans that you produce is enough to buy another set of hybrid rice for the next crop year. But you double your production. So Ang punto dyan is, sasabihin nila, wala naman po kaming pondo para makabili ng hybrid rice. Pero kung mag-sacrifice po ang government, mamigay po sila ng hybrid rice, make sure na pag lumaki ang ani ninyo, tago nyo yung pera para makabili muli kayo ng hybrid rice for the next season. So, it's also cultural eh. Kaya I sympathize with my DA officials here. Although they're trying to modernize agriculture, there's also hesitation from some farmers and farmers groups on modernizing the system. I can speak from a position of not strength, but a position of experience. Because sa sugar industry, ganito po, nagtatawanan kami kanina kasi pamilya ko taga Negros, taga Bukidnon. Problema minsan sa mga sugar farmers, bago pa sila mag-harvest, nalaman nila mataas ng presyo ng sugar. Unang gagawin nila, bibili ka agad ng Land Cruiser, ng Hilux pickup. Imbis na po bumili ng bagong tractor, imbis na bumili po ng cane rotavator or cane harvester. That's really the truth. We always joke about that amongst all these my friends in the sugar industry. But what we should be doing is, whatever income you have, bring it back to the farm. We have to make it. We have to modernize our equipment. We have to make it more efficient. Plant better seedling varieties. So, multitude of problems yan. So it's also cultural in nature, no? Traditional and cultural in nature. We have to change the mindset of our farmers. We have to modernize na. But the only way to do it, Mr. President, to be honest, is we have to be competitive. Because if we're not competitive, anong po mangyayari? Mamahal at mamahal ang presyo na bilihin dito sa ating bansa. Dahil palit ng palit po ang ani ng ating mga magsasaka. Kung palit ng palit ng ani, kulang po ang market, kulang po yung produkto, mamahal po ang presyo ng pagkain. So, but I'm with you. I'm never going to abandon, we're never going to abandon the agriculture sector. As a matter of fact, Mr. President, Your Honors, we're going to set up the special committee for RCEP oversight to make sure that our friends in the DA and the DTI and all their sub-agencies will follow to the letter, follow to the T, the mandate given to them under the different programs that I mentioned earlier. And this should be reflected, Mr. President, in the guidelines that the oppositors put as their wish list. So yung guidelines kasama na po sa ipapasa natin resolution. Nandyan po ang utos natin sa DA, ang utos natin sa DTI, ang utos natin sa DOLE, ang utos natin sa DENR. Nandun po lahat. Very novel approach to compel them to really do their mandate and help our farmers, our fisher folk, and our other, of course, the other sectors.
May we say, Mr. President, that RCEP or no RCEP, our agencies of government, especially the Department of Agriculture, the fisheries sector, must help our fisher folks and our farmers, those who bring food to our table. And so especially now that we hopefully will accede and complete the concurrence to the ratification of RCEP, all the more we must compel our DA, the fisheries sector, the DTI, and other agencies of government to ensure that the safety nets are in place, to ensure that the MSMEs are protected, and our farmers and fisher folks who have long been neglected and who have long been dreaming for better days will be supported. As we said, this is not a magic pill that will bring down the trade deficit, that will empower MSMEs, that will solve the problems of fisher folks and farmers overnight. But we cannot be left behind by all the ASEAN nations who have already ratified the agreement. And we will ensure that both the unprecedented guidelines, which are part of the concurring resolution. Again, this is the first time, I think, in the history of a Senate, aside from the VFA of 1999. And in this chamber, I think I'm the only one present here since the 1999 VFA. I am told by the COMSEC of last hearing, it's never happened that such a lengthy guidelines, recommendations with resolutory clauses incorporating the wishes of the oppositors are included in our wish list. And kaisa po ninyo kami, ni Senate President at kayo bilang chairman ng ating mga komite, we will have to watch the agencies of government, especially because we acceded to RCEP. DA, what are you doing? DTI, DOLE, BIFAR, NEDA, the Tariff Commission, Customs. We will not shirk from our responsibility in the oversight functions of the RCEP. It is something we are taking to heart. We will do region-wide consultations on how perhaps the chairman of the Finance Committee, Senator Angara, can improve the budget so that what we promised the opposition sector, the oppositors, will be complied with in the coming years. So I hope that we can do that together because not 2 or 3 senators can do this by ourselves. Alam natin na ang spending natin sa agrikultura ay napakaliit, 2% of GDP. Ang Vietnam, 6%. Ang Thailand, 4%. So kailangan talagang increase natin ang pondo, ang spending, idoble natin ang spending. So RCEP or no RCEP, hindi pwedeng agriculture as usual. Hindi. Paigtingin natin. At lalo na ngayon, aside from the Standing Committee on Agriculture, meron pa tayong special oversight on RCEP.
Thank you very much, Mr. Senate President and Madam Senate President Pro Tem for your kilometric answers. Now I have a clearer picture of how RCEP is going to work. Anyway, on a last note, Mr. President, as your chair of the Committee on Labor, I think Senator Gatchalian has already asked these questions with regard to the generation of jobs. Okay, will the RCEP have the potential to create quality jobs and increase wages?
As I mentioned earlier, Mr. President, that we have an opportunity to create 1.4 million jobs by 2031. And let me just look for my notes.
2031, that
Yeah, that's about 9
8 years from now?
And as I mentioned, the agricultural sector will get about 308,000 jobs. Industry will get about 77,600 jobs. And services about 991,700 jobs. So, napakalaki po. Almost 1.4 million jobs will be created.
That will be realized 8 years after.
Under the study that was done by the ADB, Coronadal, no?
Kororotan.
Cororoton.
Kororaton.
That was done by the DTI. It's 2031 po. It's a conservative po yan.
So after 8 years pa ito marirealize?
Actually, I think within the first year, Mr. President, if you ask me, incremental yan. Well,
First year. Sumali sa...
Pwede mo malaman yung breakdown? After a year, ilan created
Yes, sir.
jobs?
ang sinasabi po dito sa scenario nila, employment effects under RCEP scenario 1, on 2022, well, we passed 2022. The first year, it's looking at 72,000, almost 73,000 jobs for the first year.
73,000. Which
Yes, sir.
sectors are going to
It will be
benefit?
agriculture at 20,000, and the services will be almost 60,000.
And on the second year?
On the second year, it will be 203,000
So
jobs.
pataas ng pataas every year.
Pataas ng pataas po.
Alright. Until we reach the target 1.4
almost.
million.
Opo.
All right.
Yes.
That's all, Mr. President. Thank you
Thank you
for
very much.
answering all my questions. Thank
Thank
you.
you very
very
much,
much.
Senator Estrada.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Estrada. Next to interpellate is Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa.
Okay. Or Tolentino po. See? Wala si oh, yes, okay, Mr. President. Okay, very good.
Very good.
Si Bato na. My boss, my compadre.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't want to miss the chance of interpellating my boss, the Senate President, and the Senate President pro tempore.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd gladly answer any question of our dear distinguished, my compadre and distinguished chairman of the Committee on Public Order and Security. And as I would like to remind our colleagues, in my speech when I was elected as Senate President, I said that I will be with you in the trenches.
Yes.
I am here now, sir, with you in the trenches.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir.
But for the record, Mr. President, before I start my interpellation, just would like to put in record that wherever the Senate President goes, I go.
Thank you, sir.
So whatever your stand,
Mr. President.
as far as RCEP is concerned, I am with you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you to our distinguished colleague.
But the purpose of this interpellation, Mr. President, is just para mabigyan ng kunting linaw or mabigyan ng malaking kalinawan yung mga agam-agam ng ating mga kababayan patungkol ito sa RCEP, Mr. President, lalong-lalo na yung mga nag-oppose. Kaya here I am asking these questions, if I may, Mr. President.
Mr. President, willingly, I'd love to answer my fellow Mindanaoan on these issues, and clarify these issues.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, last Congress, during the deliberation of this August body on the concurrence of the Senate on the ratification of RCEP, I asked how our government prepared our agricultural sector before the full application of the provision of RCEP agreement. May we know, for the record, what are the additional efforts made by the government to fully prepare our farmers before the implementation of the RCEP? I think some of these questions were partially or fully answered during our deliberations, Mr. President. But for the record,
Yes,
Mr.
opo,
President,
opo, I would
para
be
maliwanagan lang
willing
yung
to
ating
answer.
mga kababayan,
Opo. Opo.
ano po yung mga additional efforts na ginawa ng gobyerno natin para maihanda ang ating mga magsasaka bago ma-implement itong RCEP?
Actually po, sa totoo lang, at alam ng marami ito, alam din po ni Senator Coco ito when he was discussing this. After the elections of 2022, there was a request of then President-elect Bongbong Marcos to study it, kung ano talagang impact sa ating mga magsasaka. Kaya yung last 2 weeks, hindi na natin na ipasa ito dahil gusto po ng incoming administration bigyan pansin din ang problema ng sektor ng agrikultura. And after which, he decided to become the secretary to feel the problems talaga. Nakita niya kung gaano kalaki, ang daming problema ng sektor ng agrikultura. Kaya binanner po, may mga banner programs ang niligay dahil ito po hinihiling niya. This is a priority. Every time I see, he says to me, Mr. Senate President, what happened to our RCEP treaty agreement? So, syempre, nahiya na rin po ako sa kanya. But I always tell him, boss, ano bang coming from your own beloved sister, ano ba yung mga gagawin natin, hakbang, para matulungan natin ang mga magsasaka? And so, they submitted to me, and that's why Senior Undersecretary Panganiban is here, and they submitted to me their banner programs, like the National Rice Program. Ito po ay para palakihin, palaguhin, at pagandahin ang ating rice production. Alam naman po natin, nagkaroon po tayo ng rice tarification law. And under the rice tarification law, yung income sa imported rice, dahil may tariff po yan, ay babalik po natin sa mga magsasaka. That is a law that was authored by our dear colleague, Senator Cynthia Villar. And I think we've had already, according to the list here, 2022, 1.7 million, to be exact, 1,733,957 individuals, and 3,899 groups were the beneficiaries nitong National Rice Program. Yung budget nito for 2023 is 30 billion, and target beneficiaries is 3.6 million na rice farmers, individuals. So, yan, malaking tulong po sa kanila yan, kasi magbibigay po pondo ito para sa binhi, high quality seeds, mga discount vouchers for fertilizer, procurement of equipment, and meron pang mga small scale irrigation projects. Isa po yan. Dito po tayo sa mais, National Corn Program. Kasama po dito yung kanilang paglakas po ng industriya ng mais, kasaba, sorghum, soybean industry. Sa atin sa Mindanao, maraming kasaba, mais at kasaba. So kasama po yan. And soybean, we also have a bit of soybean. So it's to develop these industries and to be utilized for livestock, poultry, and food industries. Provisions for seeds, fertilizers, biofertilizers, fuel subsidies, provision for post-harvest machinery, and facilities for FCAs. Ang beneficiaries in 2022 is 111,678 individuals and 764 groups. Meron po silang budget of 5 billion sa 2023 na ilinagay po natin through our chairperson, Senator Villar. With target beneficiaries of, imagine, almost quadrupled. It was from 111,000 in 2022. They're going to plan to give to 452,000 individuals. So times 4 ang beneficiaries nitong programang ito with 1,252 groups. Meron din pong National High Value Crops Development Program. Pangatlo, this is to help attain food security, poverty reduction, and sustainable growth. Ito po yung mga high value crops. Mangga, banana, pineapple, coffee, cacao, yung tsokolate ni ma'am, onions, lowland vegetables, and highland vegetables. And it will include programs on production, procurement of seeds and planting materials, provision of farm production equipment and machineries, rehab and maintenance ng production facilities such as greenhouse, nurseries, rain shelter, and conducting of training and training-related activities and technology. Marami po ito. May mga training and enhancement through the DAR, DA-BAR, and Bureau of Aquatic Resources, BAR, Bureau of Aquatic Resources, Agrarian Reform, huh? BAR, BAR. Okay, Fisheries Aquatic Resources. And now, the beneficiaries in 2022 was 11,000, maliit lang, 11,456 individuals with 9,700 groups. In 2023, that's 1.8 billion budget. They were trying to target 12,828 individuals and 8,655 groups. Itong National Livestock Program, marami sa mga oppositors. Your Honor, Mr. President, my dear colleague, were, of course, from the livestock, swine, tsaka poultry producers. We have a program for them, banner program po ito ng Pangulo, and this will be major interventions under the NLP, the National Livestock Program, include the following: Integrated National Swine Production Initiatives for Recovery and Expansion. Ito po yung mga natamaan ng ASF. Marami sa ating mga kababayan natamaan ng ASF, Mr. President, and they could not recover because talagang namatay lahat ng baboy nila. Kung hindi namatay, pinatay dahil sa delikadong ma-expose ang ibang baboy. National Animal Genetic Resource Improvement Program, development, maintenance, and upgrading of government nucleus and multiplier farms, animal health services, livestock and poultry training programs, support to biotechnology, animal health, feed resource development, livestock economic enterprise development. So in 2022, the number of people that were assisted are bigger than 2023. In 2022, 65,400 individuals were helped. In 2022, with 4.5 billion allocation, the target beneficiaries are 23,682. Bakit kaya lumit ito? And I will ask the DA Undersecretary later. We also have a National Fisheries Program under the BFAR. Meron din po tayong National Organic Agriculture Program. So, lahat po ito may pondo, Your Honors. And dyan po na yun tayo tututok. Palawakin ko siguro yung membership ng ating special committee para talaga matutukan natin maayos ang problema ito, especially with the agriculture sector. And tayo po sa Mindanao, alam mo naman, agriculture is our #1 industry. Very important that we protect them.
Natutuwa ako na binanggit ni Senate President lahat nung dapat gawin or nagawa ng DA. Now, to complete the story, ano naman moving forward? Siguro yun ang susunod na tanong nyo, or kung di nyo tatanungin, kinagagalak ko pong banggitin sa inyo na unprecedented ngayong ginawa natin, yung mga oppositors na kinausap namin ni Senate President ng 5 oras nung hearing, ay nagsumite pa ng kanilang wish list na gagawin ng ating mga ahensya ng gobyerno. And I would just like to read into the record some of the recommendations which will be part of the resolutory clauses that if you vote in favor, we will compel the agencies who are here at our back to do. Yes. So the DA adherence to heed the calls under the United Nations Decade for Family Farming, smallholder farms. I know whereof I speak because I'm a weekend farmer and it's a very small holder farm. To stimulate the development of public policies and investments in favor of family farming from a holistic perspective, unlocking the transformative potential of family farmers and balance the benefits expected to large-scale agriculture under RCEP. So, kasama rin yung Consultancy for Agriculture Productivity Enhancement Program, Food Safety, Packaging, Labeling, Assistance Program, Innovation System, Support Fund, Manufacturing Productivity Extension, and other productivity enhancement and innovation programs. We also have local government. Nandito po ang mga lokal na pamahalaan dahil may Vice Mayor's League ng Antique. Nandyan po sila ngayon, ang mga vice mayors, maybe they can do local ordinances para kasabay naman ng ating national policies. And this is part of the local government support services programs, including province-led agriculture and fisheries extension system, among others. So, marami po itong mga, agrarian reform beneficiaries, genuine representation and participation of farmers, fisherfolks, and ARBs. Indigenous people, hindi natin nakalimutan yan. Women and other marginalized sectors in government, agri-fisheries boards, councils, and other pertinent committees. So I'm happy to mention these as just some of the improved public-private partnership and participation of stakeholders in multi-sectoral committees such as the Committee on International Trade for the Philippine Council for Agriculture and Fisheries. Marami pa po tayong linagay para po imandato natin at ipaalala sa ating mga ahensya ng gobyerno, lalo na sa Department of Agriculture, ang kanilang tungkulin, lalo na pagpasok ng Pilipinas sa RCEP.
Thank you, Mr. President, Madam Sponsor. Am I correct in my understanding that lahat ng mga hakbangin na paghahanda na ginawa nating gobyerno para sa ating agricultural sector ito ay na-communicate na at natanggap ng ating agriculture sector, itong mga hakbangin ito. Sila ba'y fully aware sa lahat ng mga programang ito, Mr. President?
First of all, Mr. President, this has been negotiated for 10 years.
Yes.
In a span of 3 administrations. I will be honest with you. If I say yes, then that means the agriculture sector is doing well. Then that means the trade deficit is inexistent. But since the 70s, the trade deficit, at least in goods, has been there. So I cannot say that all the agencies of government in the executive are fully prepared and they've done their best. I believe that there's a long way, there's much to do. Malaki pong paghahanda, RCEP or no RCEP, na dapat pong gawin para sagipin ang sektor na pang-agrikultura at pang-mangingisda at para sa maliliit na negosyo at marami pang iba. What I'm saying is that RCEP only covers 33 agricultural lines of 15 products which are not immediately zero tariff. The immediate zero tariff are olives and olive oil. Zero tariff immediately. The others are within 10 to 15 to 20 years. And all the ASEAN nations, I'll repeat, have already ratified RCEP, and it will be to our disadvantage, perhaps, if we do not join RCEP, because the RCEP countries who are who are our trading partners outside of ASEAN, will put down their tariffs for other ASEAN nations who will be exporting the same produce to those countries like China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, while products from the Philippines will enter those countries with high tariffs. So, kung hindi ko po siguro tinanggap ang pag-defend nito, or kung hindi natin i-defend, or kung hindi natin iratipika, maybe in 10 years, when we're no longer senators, at least I, perhaps no more, will say, why did we not defend it? Why did we not join? Now, the prospective 1.3 million jobs and the safety nets, which upon our consultation with the agri sector were not implemented. So I'm taking that big leap of faith, so to speak, so that we can go along with the other ASEAN nations, our neighbor Indonesia, big country, as well as Myanmar and Laos. Huwag naman tayong manguhusan pa ng ibang bansa kung hindi tayo makasama sa RCEP na ito. Pero yung tanong nyo sa paghahanda, sasabihin kong totoo, hindi ako kontento. And I have to be honest, Mr. President, not just because I'm sponsoring it, ako'y naniniwala sa ginawa ba ng DA sa nakaraang 10 taon, maraming pagkukulang. Kaya nga gusto ko ng Special Oversight Committee para matignan natin ang ginagawa at matulungan natin, bagamat hindi tayo eksperto, dinggin ang mga dapat gawin mula sa eksperto. Kung sasabihin nyo sa akin, dahil ba sinusponsor mo ay napakaganda ng ginawa sa nakaraang 3 taon o ilang dekada, hindi po. Pero kailangan natin pasukin para wag tayo maiwanan, pero tututukan natin ang mga nakalagay dito sa bawat provision sa ating concurring resolution na ayon na rin sa mga tumututol sa RCEP. Kalaki po ng ating resolusyon dahil hindi na tayo pwede mag-amend ng RCEP. As we know, a treaty is either concurred in or rejected in toto. We cannot even amend it with an article or a comma, but we can call the agencies because we have the power of the purse and we have that oversight function vested in Congress, specifically the Senate as well, so that they meet us every quarter, every month, as often as we can, so that they can comply with what we, 24 senators or whoever will vote in its favor, that we committed to those oppositors who we promised we will do our best that their requests will be complied with.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Sponsor. So, coming from you, ibig sabihin, kung maganda yung paghahanda na ginawa natin, siguro by this time, pakunti ng pakunti yung opposition against RCEP. Ang total kung talagang na-prepare natin ng husto yung field for the introduction of RCEP, siguro baka wala nang kuwan ngayon, wala nang nag-oppose. Kaya I hope andito man yung ating mga government officials, sana kahit na deliberate natin ito, patuloy pa rin yung paghahanda para naman yung ating mga kababayan ay matanggap nila ng taos-puso itong RCEP na ito, lalong-lalo na yung nag-oppose coming from the agricultural sector. Kaya nga, Mr. President, may follow-up question is, ano ba ang mga opposition ng ating mga farmers to the RCEP? Kung may alam ng ating good sponsor. For the record, ano yung kanilang opposition? Bakit sila nag-oppose?
In fact, hanggang nung Sabado po, ako po'y nagpulong pa sa iba't ibang mga kasama ng pamalakaya. Kasama na ang Kilusang Magbubukid ng Pilipinas, Alyansa Agrikultura. Patuloy po hanggang Sabado-Linggo, hindi matatapos ang oposisyon. Habang hindi perpekto ang mundo, meron aangal at may oposisyon. At ako'y nakikiisa sa kanila at naintindihan ko sila. Hindi madaling magsaka. Meron akong abogado dito na farmer din sa 1.5 hectares sa San Antonio, Quezon. Naging rice farmer na siya para tingnan niya kung paano kahirap ang maliit na farm na 1.5 hectares. At believe it or not, sa susunod na planting season, ako po ay magtatanim na rin sa 1.5 hectares para maramdaman ko ang paghihirap ng rice farmer. I want to understand it further. Now, sabi nyo, paano po mangyayari na walang aangal? we live in an imperfect world. In any country, even if you have the most resources, I don't think we can have a zero opposition. But the fact that we hear them and we will continue to hear them, and we hopefully, with our collective efforts, can give them the resources to help alleviate the plight of sectors that could be affected. But believe me, because RCEP, before RCEP, marami na pong foreign trade agreements, free trade agreements, kaya na sinabi ko, bilang miyembro ng ASEAN, pumasok na po ang ASEAN sa maraming FTA, kasama na po ang bansang Hapon, at meron din tayong mga bilateral free trade agreement, dami yan ng JPEPA, I think some of us were here already with Japan, and there were similar opposition at that time when we were studying JPEPA in this chamber as well. So, hindi ko masasabing mali ang kanilang oposisyon. Marami po, tama eh. Kasi napabayaan eh. Kasi nagkulang ng tulong eh. Kasi marami. I can go on and on. Mismanagement, corruption, lack of resources, lack of support. We can go on and on. But would we be stymied because of the mistakes of some? No, we have to move forward. And we have to move forward along with our neighboring ASEAN nation, lest we be left by the wayside.
Thank you, Madam President, good sponsor. Mr. President, may we know what are the existing financial assistance that we are giving to our farmers? I ask this because I have a proposed bill, Senate Bill number 206, or the Filipino Farmers Financial Assistance Program Act, that aims to give direct conditional financial assistance to our farmers. May we look into this proposal as additional assistance to our farmers to cushion the effect of RCEP to their income.
Mr. President, with the permission of our distinguished colleague, I fully support that. But
Thank you.
any bill or law that will assist farmers directly, tsaka directly dapat kasi minsan hindi natatanggap. Nandyan yung budget. Ang ganda-ganda ng initiative natin sa Senado pero hindi nila natatanggap. Baliwala kung saan-saan pumupunta yung pondo. I will fully support that, Mr. President. The gentleman from Davao is my commitment. And
Thank you.
also, on the other measures, binanggit ko kanina, yung High Value Crops Program, 1.8 billion po, nasa budget. National Livestock Program is 4.5 billion. Yung Promotion of Organic Agriculture Program is 900 million. Yung National Corn Program po ay 5 billion. National Rice Program is 30 billion. Halal Development Program is 21 million. Yung National Urban Peri-Urban Agriculture Program is 318 million. Tapos, malaki pa dyan yung Farm to Market Roads. Ilan ba yung magkano yung Farm to Market Roads natin? 17 billion yata pumunta sa farm to market roads na gagamitin para sa ating mga, lalo na sa atin sa Mindanao, ay parang yung kalsada dyan pag umuulan parang ilog. Kulang na lang, bangka ang gamitin papunta ng farm. So yes, Mr. President, we have a budget for that, but it's not enough. Definitely it's not enough. Magtulungan po tayo under this oversight committee that we will set up. We'll make sure na monitor po natin ito at may mekanismo po yung oppositors. Kung nakita, wala pa rin. Magsumbong po sila sa atin. Pag yung pondo hindi nakakarating sa kanilang mga grupo, magsumbong sila sa atin at ay talaga pagalitan talaga natin sila because hindi lang sa pagalitan, siguro sa budget hearing, talagang we'll ask them to account every peso and centavo that the funds have gone to and that they should show us. We'll ask them to produce beneficiaries.
Yes.
Baka naman ghost beneficiaries na, hindi ko sinasabi meron. But we will make sure, no? Because I've been in this game for a while. Senator, all of us here in this room have been in this game as public servants for a long time. And what frustrates us more is we have good initiatives, hindi na-implement sa ground. And nasasayang lang po ang pera.
Thank you, Mr. President. Punta naman tayo, Mr. President, sa mga posibleng worst case scenario with or without RCEP. Halimbawa, Mr. President, may we know what is the worst that can happen to the Philippine economy if we will not concur the ratification of RCEP?
Maiiwanan po tayo pagdating sa foreign direct investment. Because if there is a company, for example, katulad yan, yung dinala ko dito po yung mga Amerikano na magsiset up po ng e-vehicles. Of course, tinitignan po nila ang ASEAN as another market for their e-vehicles. As a matter of fact, they have a contract for 2,000 electric buses, school buses for Singapore, 2,000. Gagawin nila dito. Obviously, kung hindi po tayo mag-RCEP, baka doon po ng Malaysia pupunta yan sa Johor. They were looking at Johor, which is right beside Singapore, or Vietnam. Kasi mas malawak po ang kanilang merkado. They can now sell the e-vehicles all over the 14 other countries with very, very little taripa. Maliit lang po yung taripa, mas mura, mabibenta po nila, very competitive. If they join us here in the Philippines, na hindi tayo sumama sa RCEP, limitado po yung kanilang merkado. Their market will be the United States. They'll ship it back to the United States or our ASEAN +1 free trade agreement. But the problem is, yung sourcing of goods, napaka-limited. They cannot source their inputs from China and then we will sell it to Japan or source their goods from other non-ASEAN countries and then sell it within ASEAN. Masasabit po tayo ng taripa niyan. We're not saying there will be no market, but it will be more expensive for us. May taripa pagdating sa mga produkto natin. So, maiiwan po tayo. I'll give you another example, Your Honor. Sinabi ko kanina, garments, damit. Yung Cambodia na yun, lumalakas yung kanilang garments market or garments industry. Tayo dati pinakamalaki. Philippines was the #1 producer. Punta ka nung Gap sa Amerika, Gap, Banana Republic, yung iba-ibang mga clothes stores dun. Tingnan mo, made in the Philippines. And ngayon, made in Cambodia na. Yung iba, made in Laos. Bakit? Mas mura, lalo na yun, dahil nasa RCEP sila, mas mura na po ang kanilang materials na panggawa nito mga damit na ito. And they're exporting it within the RCEP region at a lower tariff rate. Tayo, mas mataas ang tariff rate natin. Kaya yung binanggit ko nga kanina sa PDI, sa Inquirer, na $6.5 million na garments, garments for Japan na order po yan. Eh baka malaman ng hapon, mas mura pala dito sa RCEP countries, baka doon sila bumili. Hindi po sa Pilipinas. Nawala, it is opportunity lost for us. So ang laki mawawala po. We will look like an isolationist.
Thank you, Mr.
May I add, Mr. President? And I would just like, this is not my opinion, I'd just like to share Shanito Habito's quote or opinion. In delaying formal entry to RCEP, we virtually held hostage the ability of 90% of our economy in GDP terms and 3/4 of our workers to gain from widened economic opportunities offered by greater access to a vastly expanded market. That's quoting Shalito Habito of NEDA before. And you were asking earlier, the worst case scenario of RCEP, meron naman pong safeguard measures. RCEP safeguard measures, it provides for the mechanism for parties to address injury or threat to a domestic industry. Meron suspension of further reduction of customs duties or increased custom duties following a surge in imports if it happens. Anti-dumping and countervailing measures. There's a section on this. It affirms the parties' rights, obligations under relevant WTO rules. So, meron pong mga safeguards naman. Mekanismo
May mekanismo
na nandyan sa RCEP.
na pwedeng protektahan natin ang ating industriya from let's say, being run down by over supply of imports
Yes.
for that particular industry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam Sponsor, sa kabila naman, may we know what is the worst that can happen to our farmers and our agricultural sector in general if we will concur to the ratification of RCEP. Meron ba kayong pupursi na possible worst case scenario kapag Ni-ratify ay kinuncur natin ito?
Sa aking kapatid na taga Davao del Sur, Mr. President, I
Wala.
will never lie to him. You know that, Mr. President, Your Honor, may
Can you lie
kumpadre.
to me? You lie to
I
me.
won't lie to you. I never lie to him, and when I say that, I don't think there will be any difference or any change kasi excluded po sila eh.
Okay.
Hindi po sila kasama dito. As is po. So in other words, kung pumasok tayo hindi, yung taripa po ay pareho lang. Sila ay protektado pa rin. Hindi po sila kasama sa RCEP agreement. So, the best is, what you call, the best is, what's going to happen is status quo. Status quo tayo. Pero in terms of other industries, they will suffer. Other industries will suffer. Our manufacturing, our exports, yung paggawa ng, balik ulit natin sa Cebu, yung manufacturing ng furniture. Namatay na yung furniture industry. Pumunta sila ng China. Ngayon, ang daming umaalis na ng China, naghanap na ng kung saan ulit gagawin yung furniture. Kunin ulit natin yan. We have the best skilled workers in the region. So many potentials po, Your Honor. I'll give you one example. Kasi mahilig ako dito eh. Nagre-restore po ako ng kotse. Kami ni Tol. Mahilig po kami, Mr. President, sa restoration of classic cars. Yung mga panahon ng ating mga tatay at lolo. Do you know that no one can beat the Filipino automotive restorer? Ang galing ng ating mga skilled workers pagdating po ng of course, painting, restoration works, mechanical works. At expert tayo dito kasi lumang mga makina to. Walang computer ito. Walang bagong technology. Puro carburetor yan. And magagaling ang Pilipino dyan. As a matter of fact, there used to be a big company in Clark called Classic Speed, owned by Australians. Ginagawa nila, namimili sila sa buong mundo ng lumang kotse. Ginagawa nila, binirestore nila sa Clark, tapos dinadala sa Australia. Unfortunately, they closed shop because naging prohibitive. Hindi ko alam. I guess they left the country. I don't know why. I don't know the reason. But we can revive that industry. And we can sell to Australia. Kasi kasama na sa RCEP yung Australia eh. We can sell to Australia, to New Zealand, to Japan. Mahilig yung hapon ng mga Mustang na 1967, 69. That is just one of the many possible industries that we can do here in the Philippines that we can export using RCEP as a platform.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yun lang, gusto ko lang malaman yung mga possible worst case scenario, Mr. President, dahil nga alam natin, pagdating ng araw, kapag pumalpak itong RCEP na ito, at ayaw ko naman na sabihin ng ating mga kababayan na nag-upos ngayon, sabihin na, kayo kasi sa Senado, bakit ninyo kinankar yung ratification ng RCEP? Nasa inyo ang last yung pinaka-finals kayo sa Senado, kaya naniniguro lang tayo, Mr. President.
Naniniguro po tayo.
Naniniguro lang talaga tayo. Kasi ayaw kong sisihin tayo pagdating ng araw dahil ako ay anak ng farmer.
Opo.
Ngayon,
Ako din po, anak.
pareho tayo, Mr. President.
Pareho tayo.
Small time pa. Ikaw, big time farmer yung tatay mo eh. Ako, small time farmer lang.
Naland-reform na po kami, wala.
Backyard farming lang, Mr. President.
Wala na po kami lupa. Kinuha na ng agad.
Backyard farming lang ako. Kaya noong maliit pa ako, pangarap ko talaga, Mr. President, na magkaroon kami ng sariling baka at sariling kambing na alagaan na hindi yung mga lima lang ba? Sa amin sa Bisaya, mga lima. Kung may kambing ka, kapitbahay kita, alimahan ko yung kambing mo. Meaning, bubuhayin ko yung kambing mo, pag manganak yan ng dalawa, hati tayo. Ang isang anak sa akin, isa sa iyo. Yun ang ginagawa namin maliit pa ako, Mr. President. Pero ngayon, nung naging senador ako, bumili ako ng maraming kambing, Mr. President. At yun na, marami na akong inalagang kambing ngayon. Kaya, alam mo, tayo sa Mindanao, basically, we live by fish and by mais. Alam natin yan, di ba? Agriculture talaga tayo, basically. So, sana, huwag tayo sisihin ng ating mga kababayan pagdating ng
Mr. President, binanggit mo fish. Ang malaking gain dito ang tuna. Tuna industry natin. So, Mindanao po yan. We can now freely export all over the RCEP countries. Napakaluwag na para sa ating tuna exports. And again, babalik ako po yung binanggit ng ating mahal na kapatid from Davao del Sur. Kung I agree, sana hindi po kami sisisihin, pero if there's a failure on the agriculture side, sa tingin ko hindi ito dahil sa RCEP. Because as is pa rin eh. Kung may failure sa agriculture side, yan na po ang may kasalanan sa likod ko. Mga taga-DA. Hindi na po RCEP yun. Kasi wala namang ginalaw sa kanila eh.
So
Yan
it's not our concurrence, Mr. President.
No.
It's not our concurrence that mattered
will
most.
bring down the
that will matter most.
what will matter most is the
Is
DA
that-
programs.
Is the implementation.
Implementation ng ating existing laws and new programs. Yan, dyan tayo makatulong po dahil taon-taon itong mga programang ito eh. Bukbukin natin sila.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
With that assurance, I can sleep soundly tonight, Mr. President.
Salamat po,
And
Mr. President. Thank you.
may last question, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Is,
Yes, sir.
Is there a timeline or may deadline ba ito? Kung hanggang kailan tayo dapat mag-concur or may maglalaps ba itong offer na ito ng RCEP or what?
Wala naman pong timeline pero lost opportunity po.
Lost
Lost opportunity po. Kasi binanggit ko kanina, yung Cambodia, umakyat na ng 7% yung kanilang exports. Yung, sino yung umakyat ng 17%? Yung Vietnam. Remember, boss, yung Vietnam, Mr. President, yan yung number 1 competitor natin na yun, under the VIPs. Yung Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines. Ang bilis nila lumaki bilang ekonomiya. Hinahabol natin sila, Mr. President, at kaya natin silang habulin. Pero kung maiiwan po tayo sa mga ganitong klaseng usapin ng mga merkado, na mas malawak na merkado para sa ating produkto, hindi natin sila mahahabol. Balik na naman tayo sa Laos, Cambodia, tsaka sino ba makasama natin? Myanmar. Diba? Kung sa SEA Games, palagi tayo nandun nasa top tayo ng level 2 eh. Yung level 1. Sa Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, etc. Tayo top tayo sa Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar. Doon dapat tayo sa tier 1. But the only way to do that is we have to be part of this larger market, Mr. President. At dyan tayo, ako'y naniniwala, kung meron mang legacy na may bibigay ang Senadong ito, ay itong RCEP in the long run.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. That will be all, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Majority leader.
Salamat pa rin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Perhaps
Thank you, Sen.
we
Bato.
can continue the interpellation tomorrow. Mr. President, we have
I guarantee you.
4 left and probably we'll be able to close by tomorrow the interpellations and debate. So again, Mr. President, we thank our 2 hardworking sponsors, Senator Lauren Legarda, our Senate President Pro Temp, and our beloved Senate President, Senator Mig Subiri. At this juncture, I move that we suspend consideration of the proposed Senate Resolution number 485. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there an objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move that we proceed with the reference of business. So move.
Is there objection? There being none, motion is approved. Secretary is instructed to read the reference of business.
Bills on first reading, Senate number 1885, establishing the National Heroes Council under the NHCP, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Marcos.
Referred to the Committee on Culture and Arts and Finance.
1886, amending RA 10121 and for other purposes. Senator Marcos.
Referred to the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation, and Local Government.
1887, integrating the subject on climate change education into the science curriculum of grades 2 to senior high school of Philippine education system, both private and public. Senator Marcos.
Referred to the Committee on Basic Education, Environment, Natural Resources, and Climate Change.
1888, renaming Agham Road and BIR Road in Quezon City as Senator Miriam P. Defensor Santiago Avenue.
Referred to
Senators Angara, Cayetano AP, and Lapid.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
1889, instituting policies for the protection and promotion of the welfare of workers or independent contractors in the film, television, radio, entertainment industry. Senator Lapid.
Referred to the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources and Development, and Public Information and Mass Media.
1890, establishing the Philippine Virology Science and Technology Institute to appropriate funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Lapid.
Referred to the Committee on Science and Technology, Ways and Means and Finance.
Resolutions. Proposed Senate Resolution 486, urging the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry on the present state of our public and private buildings and other structures, both vertical and horizontal, with the end view of reviewing, revising, and updating our present building code to make it more attuned to and compliant with international safety standards. Senator Tolentino.
Referred to the Committee on Public Works.
487, expressing the deepest sympathy and condolences of the Senate of the Philippines to the victims of the earthquakes on 6 February 2023 in Syria and Turkey. Senator Tolentino.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
Additional reference of business. Bills on first reading. Senate number 1891, amending certain provisions of RA 10845 and for other purposes. Senator Revilla Jr.
Referred to the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, and Justice and Human Rights.
1892, enhancing climate resilience in agriculture to adverse climate events by institutionalizing the use of crop climate calendars, equipping farmers for climate-sensitive decision-making, and providing access to localized weather and climate information. Senator Revilla Jr.
Referred to the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, Science and Technology, and Finance.
1893, granting Philippine citizenship to Shayi Charlotte Zhang. Senator De La Rosa.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
1894, granting Philippine citizenship to Chang Ki William I. Senator De La Rosa.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
1895, removing as absolutory cause the subsequent marriage of the offended party to the offender in cases of rape, thereby extinguishing criminal liability, amending for this purpose Article 344 and repealing Article 266-C of Act number 3815, and for other purposes. Senator Marcos.
Referred to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
1896, redefining adultery, further amending for the purpose RA 3815 as amended. Senator Marcos.
Referred to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights and Women and Children and Family Relations and Gender Equality.
1897, an act to institutionalize the shared service facilities project for SMNEs, amending RA 6977 as amended by RA 9501. Senator Revilla Jr.
Referred to the Committees on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship, Economic Affairs and Finance.
1898, implementing a lifeline rate for internet services, amending for this purpose Section 17 of RA 7925. Senator Revilla Jr.
Referred to the Committee on Public Services.
Resolutions. Proposed Senate Resolution 488. Resolution in defense of former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, the 16th President of the Republic of the Philippines, against the investigation or prosecution by the International Criminal Court. Senator Padilla.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
489, resolution congratulating and commending Filipino athlete Ernst John E.J. Obiena for his outstanding performance in the 2023 indoor pole vaulting season. Senator Lapid.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
490, congratulating and commending Filipino actor Romeo John Gonzalez Arcilla for winning the coveted Volpi Cup for Best Actor in the 78th Annual Venice International Film Festival. Senator Lapid.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
491, congratulating and commending the University of San Agustin College of Law Moot Court and Debate Team for their outstanding performance and remarkable victories in multiple international moot court competitions. Senator Lapid.
Referred to the Committee on Rules.
492, expressing the strong opposition of the Philippine Senate to the resumption of the International Criminal Court investigation on crimes committed in the Philippine territory relative to the war on drugs campaign of the Duterte administration. Senator Estrada.
Referred to the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, February 21, 2023.
Is there an objection? There being done, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, February 21, 2023.